Now that all the council members are present, apologize for being late. We had a very long closed session. I will call to order the May 1st meeting of the City of West Sacramento City Council, West Sacramento Redevelopment Agency, and Finance Authority. We will begin with the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we live, work, learn, and commune is the original homelands of the indigenous people of West Sacramento, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We acknowledge and we thank the original inhabitants who have occupied, maintained, and secured this place, and who still exist on this land. We respect and celebrate the many diverse indigenous people still connected to this land on which we gather. Council met in closed session this evening. Mr. City Attorney, would you please provide us with the report?
Yes, ma'am. The council met in closed session with its real property negotiators on the 3 items on the agenda. No reportable action was taken. Council also met with its labor negotiator for bargaining with the 2 units identified on the agenda. No reportable action was taken.
Thank you. We would like to invite our guests and council and staff in the pledge, which will be led by Mr. Michael Sanchez. Please come up to the podium and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and thank you for your service, sir.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sanchez, for leading us in the pledge tonight. As is noted on our agenda, City Council is prohibited by state law from discussing or taking any action on items that are brought up under item 1 for public comment, but it provides an opportunity for a public forum from the public to share their concerns on items not listed on the agenda before City Council. And we do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other item this evening to please fill out a request to speak card and return it to the clerk. And we accept the request to speak cards upon conclusion of the reading of the staff, up to the conclusion of the reading of the staff report on any particular agenda item. Once the staff report has been read and we open the item up for public comment, at that point, the clerk will announce your name for you to walk up to the podium to speak. Now, in front of the clerk, there is a timer to ensure that everyone has a chance to be heard. And usually it's 3 minutes for each person. And we ask that all comments be limited to the specified number of minutes, which is 3 minutes. Also, in front of the clerk is an analog flip chart, which indicates which agenda item the council is currently considering. So we thank the clerk for all her hard work for helping us keep track today. We also recognize that for some, speaking in public can cause anxiety, so we request that there be no applause or boos, catcalls, or other demonstrations. Furthermore, so that we may maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers, we ask that those in attendance and those who address the City Council abide by the code of conduct posted and not speak in loud, threatening, offensive, abusive, or other disrespectful language that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of this meeting. Now this brings us to item 1, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of the council. And we ask each person 3 minutes to speak. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak under public comment?
Guy Stevenson.
Mr. Stevenson, welcome.
I'm here to just address this because I think it needs to be addressed. These lights that are on the bike trails are not fixed. And I asked Jason 8 months ago to fix them. They're like a disco when it rains. They go on and off. You have a lot of politicians that go from Davis to Sacramento, Sacramento to Davis. There's been a big problem with these lights. And now there was a homicide right down over here at Capitol Bridge. Those lights need to be fixed for the safety of people in West Sacramento. I've been calling, and it ain't a public works problem, but they like to do this thing with, well, it's not public works. Well, it's parks. And they just need to get it fixed. And I know you guys have a contractor, it's called Beard, or whoever they are. They need to fix them because this is nonsense. 8 months ago, I called, oh yeah, we're gonna fix it. We're gonna get right on it. And they don't. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is Narcan. With your safety department with the city, I think that people with parks as well as Public Works need to carry Narcan or have it available. Fentanyl is a real big problem. I worked on 2 people last week at the mortuary that I work at that have died of fentanyl. But it wasn't just fentanyl, it was fentanyl and this horse tranquilizer they're mixing, and it's called a grave drug. And it's killing people left and right. We need to save as many people that we can. Narcan is really not that expensive, and you don't even need a prescription. But I think that people that are in high volume areas with people need to carry it or have it accessible. I've been to Vallejo, I've been to Fairfield, I also went to Walnut Creek. They were all on board saying you're absolutely correct. We need to have it available to our staff, and I think it's very important that people carry it. It can save a life. They got nasal and they also have shots. And the training is really easy, and you could save somebody's life from ending up over at the coroner's office or even at the mortuary. So I encourage people, please, take some money out of your budget and buy some Narcan so these people have it accessible to them if they need it. Because saving a life is important. If people don't think, that, oh, we don't need Narcan, you do. In this day and age. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And, our chief is there to provide a little bit of background on what we currently do related to these matters.
Robin Davis.
Hi, I'm Robin and I live in my 160 square foot semi-off-grid tiny home on wheels on my undeveloped residential property here in West Sacramento. The Supreme Court just ruled that impact fees are unconstitutional if they are not proportionate to the actual impact of a specific project. This is a huge win for the people and for all housing project types. A long overdue recognition since fewer homes were built in the 2010s than in any other decade since the 1960s, largely due to these increasing fees. Housing should not be viewed as an impact, but rather an absolute benefit and necessity to a community that should be given every opportunity to thrive. We claim these fees maintain the quality of life of residents while it simultaneously decreases our access to affordable basic needs. This creates an inherent contradiction of its claimed purpose. We are going to see more and more opposition to impact fees at the state level due to this Supreme Court case win, the increased liability, and the arbitrary nature these fees hold. I've heard over and over again in these community academy meetings from staff that West-Sac is exceptionally good at receiving grant funding for projects, and that's part of the reason why these nexus studies are so inaccurate, since they are based on generalizations, predictions, and estimates of potential projects and funding sources by third-party consultants, which also cost us tens of thousands of dollars to study. We are going in circles with our housing policies, and we need radical reform by not using basic needs as a source for our revenue. The efficient thing to do will be to work towards eliminating impact fees for housing projects altogether, since that's where we are headed anyways. We also need to continue to address the dwindling workforce of the building industry and work towards ways to maintain our infrastructure. While touring our water treatment plant a couple weeks ago, we were informed our water treatment superintendent is retiring next year. As a reminder, for every 7 people leaving these types of industries, only 1 is replaced. We need more ways to increase youth awareness of all the diverse career opportunities that include alternatives to the college route. Statistically, 73% of people don't take jobs related to their degree, and many trades industries have the potential to make 2 to 3 times the average salary of a recent college grad with no student loan debt. The average student loan debt is around $38,000, and that number does not include tuition debt directly owed to colleges. That's just for loans. Educating our youth about these options and realities of our higher education system versus options to the trades will be a crucial part in maintaining our infrastructure long-term. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
We have no additional requests to speak on item 1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, we have under presentations 2 proclamations tonight. And the first will be consideration of a proclamation recognizing May 2024 as May is Bike Month, and in the city of West Sacramento. And we have today Mr. Pearson Rohr. I'm going to read the proclamation, then ask for you to come up and present a few words, if you'd like, at the podium. You can come up to the podium now while I'm reading it. And then if anybody would like to share any comments before we head down below for a photo with you. All right, thank you.
Did a copy of the proclamation?
Oh, yes, I'm going to read it.
Got you.
So this is declaring May 2024 as May is Bike Month, whereas millions of Americans engage in bicycling because it is an effective form of exercise, a viable and environmentally sound mode of transportation, and a fun and sociable activity accessible to people of all ages, levels of fitness, and income. And where more than half of commute trips and 3 out of 4 shopping trips are under 5 miles in length, which is ideal for bicycling. And whereas bicycle transportation is an integral part of the planned multimodal transportation system funded by federal, state, regional, and local agencies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve the livability of communities by reducing traffic noise and congestion, and boost public transportation ridership by encouraging riders to traverse the last mile between stations and destinations. And whereas the city of West Sacramento has completed major investments in support of bicycling, including the Riverwalk, the Washington District Sustainable Community Infrastructure Project, the Barge Canal Trail, West Capitol Avenue separated bike lanes, and Sycamore Trail Phase 1, just the beginning, we have a lot more. And whereas the city of West Sacramento is currently working towards several more major investments in bicycling, including extending the Clarksburg Branch Trail line from River City High School to Clarksburg, connecting Bright to Southport, with the remaining phases of the Sycamore Trail, including the freeway overpass, the I Street Bridge deck conversion for active transportation project, the Southport Levee Trail project, and the Port Area Infrastructure and Complete Streets project. And whereas commuting by bicycle can be safe, enjoyable, efficient, and convenient way to start and end a workday, and whereas the bicycle commute promotes, often referred to as bike to work days and energizer stations, have been successful at encouraging bicycling, commuting, and whereas May is Bike Month helps to increase public awareness for bicycling, educate the community about the benefits of bicycling for transportation purposes, and encourages people to try bicycling commuting. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the city of West Sacramento, all of us here, does hereby recognize May 2024 as May is Bike Month. Mr. Rohr, would you please provide us with your comments now?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a true honor. Again, I'm honored to accept the proclamation on behalf of the Sacramento area bicycle advocates and the greater bicycling community of the city of West Sacramento. West Sacramento is well known as a premier cycling destination in California, with cyclists moving here and traveling in regularly from the entire Sacramento Valley to ride its public green spaces, accessible gravel levees, and incredible cycling infrastructure, both existing and planned. I believe that this proclamation exemplifies the city of West Sacramento's commitments to making our community a great place to choose a bicycle for transportation and recreation, which is a hugely growing priority for for Americans of all ages and demographics. I'd like to thank especially our mayor and city council for endorsing SABA's May is Bike Month kickoff event this last Sunday. On the riverfront streets. I would also like to extend heartfelt thanks to our city's transportation planners and staff, California Highway Patrol, West Sac Police Department, and Yolo County representatives, and all others that actively participated in our event. We truly could not have done it without you, so thank you so much. We cordially invite everyone to join us again for the Velorama celebration at the West Sacramento Bike Dog Brewing and Baker Family Wines on May 19th. It's in partnership with REI, and it's from noon to 4 p.m. Everyone should really check it out. It's going to be a wonderful celebration out here. And thank you all again so much for your time and hard work towards this proclamation. And happy May is Bike Month to West Sacramento.
Thank you, Mr. Rohr. And are there any comments among council members? Well, thank you so much for all your, hard work, dedication, being a commissioner as well, sharing your expertise and your passion for everybody to get on their bikes. I know you have shared your wealth of knowledge on even those that can't afford a bike. If you can share just a little bit of where somebody can get a bike, at a reduced cost or free, and helmets too.
Absolutely. Helmets are available through both our organization and several bicycle advocacy groups in the area, both in West Sacramento and Sacramento. So reaching out to them is always a great option. We always refer people to the Sacramento Bicycle Kitchen, which is a nonprofit that takes in donated bicycles, refurbishes them, and sells them for very reasonable rates to the public. If people are under 18, oftentimes they can get a bike to those people for free as well if they come in with a guardian. So always, if you have a bike that you're no longer using it, please donate it or offer to donate it to the Bicycle Kitchen or take people to there to obtain a new one. They can be found for anywhere between $50 and $150 for a new used adult bike. So definitely check them out. And Saba has a number of amazing programs to get people on bikes and their bikes also repaired for free. The West Sac Repair Cafe also happens on the last Saturday of the month at the Bright Community Center. Not only do we work on bicycles for free, but we have people giving free seamstress services for clothing repair, jewelry repair, hardware and software, computer repair, and I even saw a toaster being worked on last time. So,
Yeah. Oh, sure, go
I
ahead.
just want to thank Madam Mayor for asking that question. That's very, very important because not everybody, as you mentioned, has access, right? And so I know that for many years, decades, in fact, there's been a vision for our city to make it more bikeable and walkable. And just yesterday, a few of us gathered for the North Trail, the River Walk opening ribbon cutting, and that in combination with our Sycamore Trail overpass, as well as improvements to current trails, extensions of others, and the Fifth Street widening project, which is really near and dear to my family who lives really close. And we've had, I've said this a million times, but a 6-member caboose of bikers who can now travel from place to place safely. And with a lot of new developments coming up in our city and a lot of people traveling to, say, the Sutter Health Park and whatnot coming up, I think it would be fantastic to have you even more present. You guys have been fantastic, but we need more. It shouldn't be May is Bike Month. It should be January, February, all the way to December is Bike Month in a perfect world, right? That's better for our bodies, better for our environment, and better for our community and connection with one another. So thank you for what you do. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
you're very welcome.
Thank you, Will.
And then, Madam Mayor, I'll just confirm the Sacramento Bicycle Kitchen, yesterday, they just posted on social media that all bikes for folks under 18 are free right now. You were spot on.
Are they available for the big day of giving as well?
Yes, I believe they have a nonprofit page listed for the Big Day of Giving, as does Saba.
Always put in that plug. Well, you deserve it. You do some
Thank you.
excellent work, and that's incredibly important for our community, all of us here on council, getting everybody on their bicycles and take advantage of, just everything that we've been doing over the years to build more bicycle and safe pathways around the city. So thank you so much. If y'all want to go down and hand proclamation over.
Great.
Mayor Pretend Early, do you have the next, let me take a look. We have our Next, proclamation, which we will be recognizing May 2nd, 2024, is the big day of giving in West Sacramento.
Oh my gosh, I'm very
On to
excited.
you.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
That's
Jessica,
why
do
you
you
have
want to, Jessica Hubbard, do you want to come down? Come on down. May 2nd is big day of giving. So I have the proclamation, so I'll read the proclamation, then we would love to hear more about the YOLO Community Foundation and the work that you guys are doing to promote Big Day of Giving. So, whereas the Sacramento Region Community Foundation, a trusted resource for contributing to local and regional organizations, will host the 12th annual Giving Day on May 2nd, 2024, in partnership with local and regional businesses and community leaders throughout a 4-county Sacramento region to encourage charitable giving. And whereas over the past 11 years, more than 60,000 people in our region donated Big Day of Giving, raising nearly $91 million that local nonprofits have used to improve the quality of life in our region. And whereas this year, over 820 nonprofits will participate in Big Day of Giving, 11 of which are located in the city of West Sacramento, serving its residents. And whereas Big Day of Giving is an opportunity for City of West Sacramento residents to show their community pride through supporting the good work of our local nonprofits. And whereas philanthropic investment help hardworking nonprofits make an impact on the causes that affect us all and provides donors with a sense of ownership and pride in their community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the West Sacramento City Council does hereby proclaim May 2nd, 2024 as Big Day of Giving and encourages all residents to support the work of local nonprofit organizations who help the City of West Sacramento community thrive. Proclaimed this first day of May 2024. I'm so excited to have you here, Jessica. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your organization and the work that you all are doing?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for this proclamation, for raising awareness about the important role that Big Day of Giving plays in our community. My name is Jessica Hubbard, and I'm the Executive Director of the YOLO Community Foundation. We partner closely with the Sacramento Region Community Foundation throughout the year, and particularly at this time of year. Our goal with respect to the Big Day of Giving is to raise awareness among Yolo County donors about the important role that nonprofits play in the Yolo County community, and to encourage them to give on May 2nd. And in the days leading up to May 2nd, for our local nonprofits, the unrestricted dollars that they receive on Big Day of Giving allow them to innovate, to grow their impact, and throughout the year. And so it's an incredibly important opportunity for our local nonprofits. This Big Day of Giving, we at the YOLO Community Foundation have a call to action for our Yolo County community. We're asking our community members first to learn about Yolo County nonprofits and the important work that they do locally. We have the Yolo County Nonprofit Directory available at Nugget stores. It went out in the news ledger this weekend. It's available on our social media. That features the nearly 130 Yolo County nonprofits participating in Big Day of Giving along. And then we also encourage you to learn from our 2024 State of the Yolo Nonprofit Sector Report, which was sponsored by the Tiger Foundation, and really gives us the why it's so important to support nonprofits now and throughout the year. Second, we're encouraging our community to share about the important role nonprofits play and about supporting them on Big Day of Giving. We have the YOLO Big Day of Giving Outreach Toolkit. I think I've reached out to many of you in this room about those resources. It's sponsored by the Yellow Federal Credit Union, and it makes it very easy to share on social media, meeting announcements, emails, and so on about and encourage your community to give. And then finally, to give tomorrow, Big Day of Giving, right up until 11:59 p.m. at bigdayofgiving.org/Yolo County. And particularly, we're about 4 hours away from midnight. Yellow Federal Credit Union is sponsoring a Big Day of Giving Yolo County prize for the very first gift on May 2nd to a YOLO-based nonprofit.
Wow.
So set your alarm for about 11:50 so you can get on there and, start hitting refresh like you're signing your kids up for camp.
Right.
And make that first gift. So thank you so much for raising awareness and for
Big
all that you do
prize.
for Yolo County nonprofits. Thank you.
What's the big prize? Curious.
$500 to the nonprofit. So no matter what size, the minimum gift size for Big Day of Giving is just $10. But whichever YOLO nonprofit receives the first prize will get a $500 donation from Yellow Federal Credit
Incentive.
Union.
Thank
Right?
you. Yeah, love it.
Refresh,
Get those
refresh,
clicking fingers
refresh.
out. Right? Thank you.
Jessica, don't go anywhere. So when we're going to take a picture of you when we come down, but I wanted to make sure that I expressed my appreciation for your leadership at the YOLO Community Foundation. Your dedication over the past 5 years, yes, I've been keeping up with you, has been remarkable, and the impact that you have had both in our county and West Sacramento, it has been amazing. I want to thank you for your vision and your guidance through the YOLO Community Foundation, which again has made a significant difference in our community, from donating $5 million to nonprofits in Yolo County and beyond, to launching capacity building programs for local organizations. The foundation's impact under your leadership has been very, very immense. And so I just wanted to give a big shout out. You can also contribute to the Yolo Community Foundation as well for Big Day of Giving. I know that your organization impacts many nonprofits in our community, and so would be remiss unless I gave you that shout out too.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's been a privilege, and I had big shoes to fill. And Fab Sandine, the picture right over here on this wall, was my predecessor, and so really appreciated the opportunity to pick up her torch in this role.
Comments? I just want to say, Jessica, thank you so much. I know during COVID, when things were being launched, it was such a challenge to get people to donate and to feel the connection. But I think they overcame and found more creative ways to grow, what your current programming is doing, and to bring people more together to work collaboratively, because I think it was getting so competitive and very hard. But man, you made it. You pulled everybody together and made everybody realize we all need to row together and survive. And I think that built a stronger community where we are at today. So thank you so much for that leadership, and for bringing us along to, guide us and to continue to contribute and, spread the word that, tomorrow is Big Day of Giving. Such an important day for all of our residents who benefit from the resources that, our nonprofits are providing for our community. It's been a huge difference, huge impact in many people's lives. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Want to go down for a photo?
All right, coming down.
Next, we have our consent agenda, item 4 through 8. Are there any requests to remove an item or questions for presentation? I plan on pulling item number 6. Yep. All right, item number 6. Who's the lucky person coming up to share with us just a little bit about that this item?
Yes, good evening, Council. Rachel Hall, Construction and Facilities Development Manager, item 6, and your question?
Just a little background about it.
Yeah, so this item here is to do some remodeling work at the police department. At the current facility that they have there right now is the original facility. So this TI project out there right now would be converting some, or redoing some of the flooring, some of the cabinetry, redoing all the offices, so desks, and all of some of the storage areas as well. So it's more of a refurbishing of the current facility.
And how old is the building itself? How long has the police department been in there?
It's been there, so it's been there since 1995. The headquarters, that's been there right now. So that's current building right now.
Okay.
And then in 2007, we had the lease of the additional building across.
I see.
Yeah, the street.
On the corner there. Well, thank you so much. I think it's long overdue that we do some rehab work in that very old building. I've been there, visited, toured, and walked around, and, I see staff sitting on top of each other. So hopefully they can spread out a little more, have better resources, because they do an incredible service to our community. And thank you so much, Jay, and your entire staff. You work very hard at providing the best support, as you have done, even with our fire departments. I've seen some incredible work. So thank you so much for all you do to make that happen. And if, with that, I'll accept a motion to approve our consent agenda items 4 through 8.
So moved.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry,
yes, public comment?
item 8 is being pulled
And we
from
are
the
pulling
agenda
Item 8, yes. Okay.
and will be brought forward to the council at a later date.
All right, thank you for that reminder. Items 4 through 7, item 8 has been pulled and will be brought back in a future date. And I'll accept the motion for that.
Okay, so moved.
Councilmember Alcala moved and Councilmember Orozco seconded. And I wanted to ask Madam Clerk, do we need public comment? Nobody's submitted a request for that?
We've had no request to speak on the consent agenda items.
Okay, thank you. So would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Sulpicio Hull?
Aye.
Councilmember Alcala?
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Early?
Aye.
Mayor Guerrero?
Aye. Right, items 4 through 7 has been approved. We have next 2 public hearing agenda items under capital projects, and the first is item 9, a public hearing to consider adoption of resolutions 24-45, 24-46, 24-47, declaring the public interest and necessity and authorizing commencement of eminent domain proceedings to secure real property interest necessary to complete I Street Bridge Replacement Project, in parentheses, 010-102-002, comma, 010-102-005, comma, 010-372-002, comma, 001-372-003, close parentheses, CIP 10033, comma, and we have our capital projects real property asset managers. Is it going to be Mr. Fred Arnold who'll be presenting on this item? There you are. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. As you just succinctly put, this item that's before you today is a matter concerning adopting resolutions of necessity to continue the I Street Bridge project to move forward in the acquisition process. These are time-sensitive documents that need to move forward in order for the property to be acquired at this time. It's technically somewhat at an impasse. We're unable to come to terms presently, and without moving forward, the project would be delayed.
Thank you, Mr. Are you done with your
Be
presentation?
happy. I have consultants here and a team to answer any questions that you might have for opening the public hearing. And I know we have to hear from the property owners too. At least they're invited to speak on this matter as
Sure.
well.
And I would have the property owners, Mr. City Attorney, under public comment, or do they present at the same time without time limits, or what do you recommend?
They can speak during the public comment
Okay,
period.
thank you. We'll have
I
them-
would suggest that if you want to give them a little bit of extra time, I would say 5 minutes is
5
probably
minutes
enough. We want to
each?
make sure that they have an opportunity, and they are, in this particular type of public hearing, treated a little differently from the rest of the public. So I think the normal 3-minute limit on members of the public is fine, but you can give the property owners or their representatives a little extra time.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. And do they need to submit a request to speak card as a formality?
No, I
No?
think for the property owners and their representatives, you can just open it up and let them come up on the appropriate
Okay.
time.
Thank you for your guidance on that.
I'm going to take a seat and wait if you have any other further questions.
Any questions among the council members at this time? No? Okay. This time, I think next we'll have the property owners come up and speak. Property owners do not want to come up and speak at this time? Oh, yes, okay. Turn in a card. Oh, no, you don't need to, it's okay.
I did already, that's
Oh, you did? Okay, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
We'll open it up for public comment again, though, by the way, so, after this.
Okay, good evening, council members. I do thank you for a little extra time. My name is Gail Overhouse, and I'm a co-owner of the property referenced in the proposed resolution of necessity number 24-47. I represent the three families that are co-own this property. This land has been owned by our family since the early 60s. And I'm speaking today because I want to make sure the council has a clear understanding of the facts related to this project, and specifically the interactions with city staff and contractors, and how we, the impacted citizens, have been treated in this process. The proposed resolution of necessity affects our 3 parcels on 2nd Street. For your reference, the land I'm talking about is located along the Sacramento River, bordered by the current I Street Bridge on the south, and on the north, it's where the new bridge will be, and 2nd Street on the west. So it's that block between where the current bridge and new bridge will be. The total size of the land, the three parcels, is 4.2 acres. So when redevelopment started occurring in West Sacramento in the Washington district, we were pleased to see this. We were looking forward to utilizing the 2nd Street land either for development ourselves or working with another developer to enhance the Washington district. But before we could move forward with any plans, the City of West Sac adopted resolution number 2095 in 2020 for the North Riverwalk Trail Expansion Project, and subsequently took possession of our property in October 2021. And I'm going to tie together why the Riverwalk project is tied to the new bridge project, okay? So this eminent domain action took various pieces of these parcels as permanent easement, construction easement, and during that time, the city was implementing the Riverwalk expansion. We received little to no communication from city representatives to negotiate a fair compensation for our property. Finally, we were able to get a mediation session in January of 2023, 15 months after the city took our property under eminent domain. And the city's representative, their city's property asset manager, and the city's attorney, and we had retained legal counsel as well because of these legal filings. And what's important is during that mediation, several key things happened that are very important as they relate to today's resolution of necessity for the I Street Bridge, the new bridge. First, the city's representative, Mr. Fred Arnold, who spoke earlier, requested that the negotiations for the Riverwalk compensation be suspended temporarily because upcoming city projects were also going to impact our land. He also told us that the new bridge project, as well as the bridge, the old I Street Bridge conversion to a pedestrian crossing, these 2 projects would also be impacting our land. So now we have a total of 3 city projects that were all going to be affecting different portions of this 4.2 acre set of these parcels. And he told us the timeline was about mid-2023 that we would expect to see an offer related to the I Street Bridge project. So based on these conversations with Mr. Arnold and our trust in what he was telling us, we agreed to defer the compensation negotiations for the Riverwalk until an offer for the entire property was made in conjunction with the new I Street Bridge project. Again, these conversations took place in January of 2023, and this was the basis for why we stopped the negotiations on the Riverwalk project. So time goes by. In May 2023, the owners met with the city's appraiser for the new I Street Bridge project. At this meeting, the appraiser for the bridge project showed us the scope of the appraisal that he was conducting. And we were surprised to see it only included a portion of our land, not the whole thing, as we had been told by Mr. Arnold. So 2 days later, I did call Mr. Arnold to ask why the people working on the I Street Bridge land acquisition were only looking at pieces of our property, not all of it. And he indicated to me that he could only include the scope of the property needed for the bridge at this time, but when he received the appraisal, he would talk to the city about acquiring all of the land. He agreed with us that our remaining land, after the city took their pieces of it, would be little of no value to us. So I continued checking with Mr. Arnold throughout the summer of 2023 and into the fall, waiting for more information on an offer from the city for the entire parcel. timelines were delayed because the city had to deal with issues. So we did not see an offer package from the city until December 22nd, 2023, right before the holidays. So that entire year was taken up by the city's work to get this package together. After the owners reviewed the offer package, we corresponded with Ms. Jennifer Cole from Monument Right-of-Way, the city's contractor hired to address the land acquisition. The owners asked for more details about the specific structures that were planned for our property so we could assess the impact. And after a couple exchanges of documents, we met with Ms. Cole and a project engineer on site at the property on March 21st, 2024. And during that time, we asked our questions. We again raised our concern with the city's plan to use such a substantial portion of our land, yet leaving us with these scattered pieces of unusable property. And we did not agree with the city's plan to take just portions of the property. We once again stated that we felt the city needed to acquire the full property if they were going to parse it and take all these different pieces for the projects. So it's important to note that between the Riverwalk project, the new I Street Bridge, the city is going to use about 50% of our property. And this is not contiguous. This land is scattered. There's pieces. There's probably about 8 or 9 different pieces across this 4.2 acres. It's not like one section of it and we have the rest remaining. So then that was March 21st, we met with Ms. Cole and talked about, what they were planning the project. On March 22nd, the next day, we received notice of the city's intent to adopt this resolution of necessity and commence with condemning our land for the new I Street Bridge. So the sad thing about the notice we received, the first line reads, "The city of West Sacramento has been negotiating with you to acquire the above listed property." And I just went over what happened there and explained to you what happened. And there was no negotiations that took place. There have been none. Okay? So before this, so that's the sad part about this, is that there were supposed to be negotiations between the city and the owners before taking action to condemn the project under eminent domain, but none of that has occurred. So I know you're concerned about timelines to keep the bridge project on schedule, but understand where the time was taken. It was all taken with the city's internal tasks. None of the time has been spent talking to the property owners. And I know you're thinking, well, this adoption doesn't really stop the negotiations moving forward. However, now the owners have no trust in that the city will step up and negotiate in good faith about this property. As I've just told you, we haven't received any fair compensation for the property that the city, condemned in 2021, used for the Riverwalk. In fact, we saw the show about the news article about this, the council held the ribbon cutting saying the Riverwalk project is done and celebrating that. But I have to ask, were you even aware that the Riverwalk project is in fact not complete? Because you have not paid any compensation to the owners of the land. So I don't see how it can be considered complete, and this is a big open issue.
I'm sorry, ma'am. The 5-minute time limit was met. I'm sorry, I'm not
sorry.
sure what happened with our timer.
Okay, let me just close then. I'm closing. This is it.
Certainly.
So to remedy this situation, I urge you to reject this resolution of necessity, and instead, to remedy this, our ask is that you direct the city representative to negotiate with us on the purchase of the entire 3 parcels impacted by the city's projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other requests here? Okay.
The card, I guess, got misplaced. Ron Birch. I'm part owner of 221 2nd Street. We've owned that property now for over 30 years. There seems to be some confusion on how much property the city is going to take from us. December 1st of 23, the company that you hired that gave us this packet said the city wants all the property. March 2nd, we get a letter from the city saying they only want a portion. Last week, I got a letter from the city saying you're only allowed to take whatever the project needs. What does that mean? The law specifically states that you must acquire the amount of property you're going to use before you have the resolution of necessity vote. We need to know how much you're going to take. That's the law. In your report compiled by CBRE, it shows that there's 12,632 square feet of property, as stated on our tax form. Furthermore, if you look at the report, it clearly states the value they placed on their riverfront property is 22 cents a square foot. The city staff added what the city wants to pay for the Second Street side, plus the 22 cents a square foot for the riverside. That's crazy. The law states that you have to believe it's a reasonable offer for the property. I can't not imagine you think 22 cents a square foot for riverfront property is reasonable. Why does the city go over 400 miles outside the city limits to have West Sacramento property appraised? They even use some of their own property in that city as comparisons. And I've spoken to the people at the company, and I have emails from them which confirm their location. We just completed an eminent domain case approximately 7 months ago down the middle of our property for your bike trail. Now, 7 months later, you want more of it. Why pay for an easement, then come back and take both sides of that easement? The money that's been wasted, the taxpayers' money that's been wasted on it is outrageous. Why don't you make your best and final offer before you take us to court? Because right now you're saying we either accept your 22 cents a square foot for the riverfront or you're going to go to court. I made a reasonable counteroffer to the city back in December, which was rejected. Government Code Section 7267.2 states you must make an offer that you believe to be just compensation. The letter that I sent to you, which was some questions were answered by the city, there's some letters and some numbers there below my signature. It's a current ongoing case the city has for eminent domain. You should read what the judge says, the Superior Court judge. He's not very happy with the city for the past 10 years, the way they've conducted eminent domain. And maybe that's why I got 10% or 10 times what you offered me for the bike trail. That bike trail was offered to the city for free. And the judge asked Fred Arnold and Mr. Chisholm, would you take it for free? And they said no. So you ended up paying me 10 times what your appraisal was. It's ridiculous. It's a waste of money. Now, I know you're busy with a bunch of stuff, but this is eminent domain, the taking of someone's property. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Are there any other property owners who would like to speak at this time? Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak?
Both of the individuals who submitted cards were property owners and have already spoken. We have no additional requests to speak.
Okay, thank you. Closing the public comment, bringing it back to council for further discussion. Are there any questions or comments among council members? Mr. Arnold, I do have some questions. So, sorry, I thought you were going to say something. So the comment of just compensation, can you help me understand in relation to this process, how that works?
Well, I also have our attorney here as well.
Okay, if you'd like attorney
We have
to.
our attorney here, and we have right-of-way agents as well, the company from Monument. But the statute itself, I'll defer to Mr. Chisholm to
Mr.
define
Chisholm,
that.
yes, can you please,
Compensation.
can you please provide us with, and also just provide us with the guidance on the vote that we're taking on what we're doing, the transaction that, that we are taking here today, please.
Sure. Yes, it is an important part of the constitutional right of property owners that they receive just compensation. City just can't simply take property. Any public agency must pay just compensation. In this case, and per the statute, the compensation is established by a qualified appraiser, a licensed appraiser who has the MAI, special degrees in appraisal. who go out, look at the property interests, which are the subject of the condemnation. They do their analysis. They look, in this case, at what comparable properties are selling for, and they come up with an appraised value of the property. The city then is required to offer the appraised value for the property. So it's not just a number that's picked out of a hat, for instance, it's the appraised value. And if the owners dispute that, they have an absolute right to negotiate, which has occurred. And if the parties cannot agree, the matter goes to court, and the jury is then empowered to determine what is the just compensation that the city must pay to the property owners. So there is certainly a process that goes through, and it is, say, an established amount through expert appraisal opinion, which ultimately parties can't agree, the jury will decide. That's, in a nutshell, what just compensation is. What we're here tonight asking for the council to do is to make certain findings which would allow for the city attorney to file an eminent domain action to start the process to acquire the title through, of the properties through condemnation. Does not preclude negotiations. There will be negotiations once this passes. However, this starts the process, and it also allows for the acquisition of possession of the property by the city to proceed with the project while these negotiations are ongoing. So it helps facilitate a very important public project while negotiations are ongoing. So there's a statutory right which the city and public agencies have, which we are asking authorization for this evening.
Thank you for that explanation. It's very helpful. And I also wanted the public to be aware that you will continue to negotiate. And it is our understanding that property owners are here in defense of what their property is and the value of their property, and to continue to work it out. It's, I think, a process that we need to take and give you the authority. You just can't go off and negotiate independently without our authority. So for that, I appreciate that council has come back to us and asked us for that authority. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a legal process without our support in that effort. So that's what we are doing here today, is to give you that authority to move forward in that. And that, and this is for the I Street Bridge, the bridge that I have been very supportive of. And I've also toured myself, walked around the areas to see some of the properties that were going to be considered for eminent domain. I had a question regarding the bike trail comment that came up. Can somebody provide a little more background about that?
Yes,
I don't wanna
and
leave
perhaps
that
Mr. Arnold can. I can tell you that there are two separate projects.
Two separate projects.
The bike trail project was the lead project. It came to fruition, and it was brought before council back in 2021. At that point, the plans were in place, the funding was in place, and the city was in a position not to delay the bike trail, but to move forward with it, which was a very important project. So that did go forward. Properties were acquired. A couple of condemnation actions were filed. But similar to this, compensation negotiations were occurring while project construction also occurred. That's what happened there. Right. And while that was in place, then the I Street Bridge project was brought to fruition. Project plans were approved, funding was approved, and so now we're in a position to move forward with that project. But say two separate projects, two separate funding mechanisms. I don't know if you have anything to add.
The only other thing I wanted to emphasize, because the comments have been made that the property owners were not compensated. One of the specific requirements when you're entering into eminent domain is that the fair market value of the property that we've appraised, whether we're in agreement or not, has to be deposited into what they call the State Condemnation Deposit Trust Fund. So those amounts are not with the city, they're with the Condemnation Deposit Trust Fund for the property owners to withdraw. So they can withdraw that money at any time while we're still negotiating. Now, and I'll just say this as an example. If the condemnation deposit is like $100 and we settle at $300, then they would get the additional $200 at the end of the settlement. So there's not a penalty for withdrawing the money that's put into the Condemnation Deposit Trust Fund. So the same thing would happen if we were granted the ability to move forward with starting the resolution of necessity. Our next thing would be to deposit monies in the condemnation deposit trust fund for the appraised amounts, as we have so done for the North Riverwalk, and would do the same thing for the I Street Bridge project.
I'll add to what Mr. Arnold said, that if there is an increase in compensation paid beyond what the initial deposit was, obviously the property owner would get that, as well as they would get interest on that.
Right.
Oh, okay. Here, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Alcala.
Still a little ambiguous. So the first speaker, Mrs. Overhouse, she was referencing that they had not gotten compensated. Is that what you're talking about? That
Yes.
That's fun. Very good. And then Mr. Birch, I believe, spoke about having to pay 10 times. I wasn't clear about what that entailed.
Well,
Or you had to pay out, the city had to pay out 10 times. I wasn't clear about that.
yeah, as I followed what he was saying, he was alluding to the fact of what the final settlement was because we ended up making a final settlement. It went to condemnation, and we ended up in arbitration, and then we had a settlement in arbitration for an amount. He's saying that he had made an offer for the city to settle early on for an amount that was substantially less than that. And to an extent that I was there, that was true, but at the time that we asked to reach that settlement, he withdrew and said he was no longer going to discuss with the city. So there was an offer on the table. He decided he did not want to take it. He did not want to come back, because I was specifically just here, new to the city when that occurred, and had our consultant, not the consultant that's here today, but another company, Doken Engineering, went back and tried to engage him with the revised counteroffer, and he refused to discuss anything with us, which led us to go into the eminent domain proceedings.
Very helpful. My understanding of the process includes, the staging to prepare for the construction. And there was some confusion, I think, from what I heard from one of the property owners, that they don't know what land you need for what. And have you observed like this ambiguity in the instructions that they may have a hard time understanding?
Well, starting with the North River Walk, I think it was very clear what the city needed, which were easements for the bike path itself that really averaged a width of, say, 20 feet or more. Those acquisitions, to an extent, I would say, bifurcated the property, but there was already a maintenance road on top of the area that we were acquiring for a trail. So they were compensated because we needed to appraise, but as far as taking new property, it was already being used for a maintenance road.
Oh, okay.
On top of the levee at that location that we were talking about for those properties. Then when you move forward now, as was stated, there was dialogue ongoing with regard to, well, I want you to buy all of my property. The same held true for Mr. Birch,
Yes.
and the same held true for Mrs. Overhouse at that time, that they wanted us to buy all of their properties. We're limited by statute and the grant funding that we have and the obligation we have to federal projects to where we have to engage and get into making the fair market offer for what statutorily is the amount. We went to condemnation. Just like we did with Mr. Birch on the North Riverwalk portion, we ended up having a settlement for that. We could not make offers for property for the North Riverwalk that were not needed for the I Street Bridge. The I Street Bridge was still evolving as far as reaching 65% design, 95% design, and ultimately getting the appraisal maps done. There was a process we could not offer them for smaller 20-foot wide easements. We couldn't go and compensate you and acquire the whole property because there was no justification that the city could make. I knew other projects were coming online, but they had not evolved enough yet.
I see. That helps. I believe that the property owners, at least one of them, has an attorney, correct?
That's what I believe, yes. We've received
So
correspondence.
an attorney would help explain the process. An attorney would help them to understand this process?
Well, I can't speak for,
The work of a different attorney, I get it.
yeah, so.
But you would
know,
hope that maybe their attorney would be informative.
Yeah, I mean, the attorney's job is to do the best they can for their client. And in this
Right.
case, it would be getting the most money that they could get for their property. So,
Right.
and that's what I'd expect he would do to appease his client. So,
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. I do have one more question. It seemed like there was a delay in this process. Can you help me understand why there was a bit of a shift in the timing?
well, I don't say per se that there was a delay. It just took time with the, as you know, we had it, the appraisal, the EIR was approved on the project in 2018, 2019. We moved forward with design, 65% design, then we got to 95% design. We were ready to go out and begin making offers last year, and we moved, the project came back to the coffers to amend that EIR to remove properties that were being impacted because they were going to affect residential impacts. Therefore, we had to resubmit and redo the EIR, which added that time. So I don't want to call it a delay. It was something at the behest and to the benefit of the properties that were being affected that assisted those property owners. So I don't really, in a way, consider that a delay. That was just the evolution of the project.
I see.
And so it evolved to the point to where it is now, where those residential properties are no longer being affected, but we have a new design that had to be updated in terms of the EIR. So that's how we evolved to where we are now, so.
Thank you for the clarification. I sit here corrected that it wasn't a delay, but the evolution of a revised EIR. I recall there being a modification in understanding like vehicle miles traveled versus another way of, making that determination. I don't know, do you remember what that was?
No, it wasn't VMT. It had to do with, no, I don't. I don't want to play
Okay.
planner at this point, but yeah.
Well, there is somebody who understands, and we received a presentation when the revised EIR occurred.
Right,
and I
yes, Jason
recall
McCoy.
Jason McCoy.
Yes.
And he did explain that we could take into consideration some changes on how we can calculate, reducing the greenhouse gases, and that was taken into consideration.
Yes.
I do understand, Mr. Arnold, that your level of experience in this is much needed for this very sensitive work of eminent domain. And, your expertise has been just incredible and valuable for this very delicate process. We do want a bridge,
Sure.
the Ice Street Bridge. We have been working hard to get the funding and securing funding as we go along. But we also, understand that there are people whose homes are, that they've had for many generations have to be taken a look at, and there's going to be some negotiation, which is part of the process. And it's a beautiful riverfront property. However, it's a place where we're surrounded by water, and this is not the first time the city has had to address situations like this, such as, levee setbacks, in order for us to continue to protect the city. And so we are so glad that we have you here with your experience to be able to help City Council, navigate this very important process and to work with the residents so that we can come to some amicable solutions.
Sure. I just want to assure you and the council that me being as a child, my home was affected by eminent domain. We were booted out and had to move to another location. So I'm sensitive to the plight of these property owners. And I want to say before you as the council in a public forum that I'm going to advocate on behalf of the property owners that they get the best settlement available to them that we can produce fairly. I'm not just going to egregiously run over property owners or try to abuse them through the power of eminent domain. I am here as a public servant, and I'm going to do right by the city as well as our citizens.
Thank you so much. We have Mayor Pro Tem Early would like to share some remarks.
I do want to just make sure I ask a clarifying question because I do remember us changing some of the design to make sure that we weren't actually going through or having to take property that was a primary residence or a residential property.
Correct.
And so I at least remember and thinking to myself, how good it felt that we were not going to be taking residential property or property that families were living in. I do want to ask this clarifying question. With the change in design that we did make and what you have before us now, are any of the properties that we're talking about primary residence for families or for households?
No, they are not. The properties that we are taking a look at for this project are primarily vacant properties along the waterfront. There are some properties near Second and C, behind Burgers and Brews and Teriyaki Madness that are due to, as the bridge comes down and lands, the roadway is widened to about 4 to 6 lanes. And so we need to provide replacement parking to the commercial operators that are there. And we've identified property behind them to acquire that property as replacement parking.
Okay, so parking, but not primary residence or residential
No
property.
residential properties, correct.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was actually the question that I had. I wanted to make sure that we clarified that for the record and for the audience that are listening. I know for many people who aren't familiar with this process, me included,
There you go.
This process may not be as straightforward as it might be to the experts who deal with this type of thing every day. So I just want to make some clarifications that, is it fair to assume that this process that you're undergoing certainly has limitations when it comes to the scope of the land that you're discussing with the property owners, because you are limited to only focusing on the portions of the parcels that are absolutely necessary for this federal project?
Yes, we're limited to that extent, to the extent that we can reach an amicable settlement with a property owner for a larger piece that is within the project scope. Those are what we call administrative settlements, and they have to be reviewed by Caltrans and approved by Caltrans. I expect that that's where we're going to get to while we're going through the resolution of necessity process. The benefit to the property owner and the project is both the benefit to the project and the property owner is that we file the resolution of necessity, we get legal possession, the construction can begin, and we can continue negotiating with the property owners to reach that amicable settlement. I am going to purport where we are today, and as the project has evolved, that we will be doing administrative settlements, bringing them back to the city council and to the city manager for your indulgence and consideration as to whether or not it's something that you think meets the needs of the city.
But in order to address those concerns to a broader scope, we have to take this action this evening to provide you that ability.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? With that, I'll accept a motion to approve this agenda item.
Early moves.
I'll second. Right. Mayor Pro Tem Early moved, and Councilmember Sulpicio Hall second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sulpicio Hull?
Aye.
Councilmember Ocala?
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Early?
Aye.
Mayor Guerrero?
Aye. This item is approved. Next,
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you so
Madam,
much,
thank you.
Mr. Arnold and the team. Next up is agenda item 10 under fire is a public hearing to consider objections to the proposed removal of weeds. And we have Fire Department's Fire Marshal Brian Johnson to present on this item.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Stand by. Sorry.
Technical stuff here.
Sorry.
I think
Good
we're saving
evening.
money on materials.
I know. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Brian Johnson with the Fire Department. At the April 10th council meeting, the council adopted a resolution which essentially kicked off the Fire Department's annual weed abatement program. After that night, we mailed almost 1,000 property owners notices to their obligation to maintain their property. Tonight, I respectfully recommend the council to hold a public hearing to hear comments and/or objections on those letters. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
No comments among the council members. I'll open it up for public comment. Madam Clerk? Any requests to speak on this?
We
item?
have no request to speak on item 10.
All right, bring it back to council. If there are no comments or questions, I'll accept a motion to.
So moved.
To approve this item.
Early second.
Councilmember Alcala moved and Mayor Pro Tem Early seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sapezio Hull.
Aye.
Councilmember Alcala.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Early.
Aye.
Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. Right, this item is approved. Thank you so much. All right, next is item 11. We have two regular agenda items. Under item 11, is finance is consideration of resolution 24-40, approving exception to the 180-day waiting period to hire a CalPERS retired annuitant in accordance with government code sections 7522.56 and 21224. And I think we'll have Mr. Williams present, correct?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council.
Hi, good evening.
This item requests the approval of Resolution 2440, approving an exception to the 180-day waiting rule for hiring a retired annuitant. This item is presented to you tonight on the regular agenda in order to comply with CalPERS regulations, which require it to be on the regular agenda. Recently, a long-term employee retired from the Utility Billing Division. Currently, the division is going through significant change. Utility Billing has recently transitioned to a new printing and mailing provider. It's currently upgrading its billing software from an on-premises version to a cloud-based version. Concurrently with that, Utility Billing is also implementing an online bill presentment and bill pay software. The division has an energetic and dedicated staff, but they do not have a lot of experience. The current group now has only one employee who's been in the group more than 2 years. With all the change going on in utility billing, it is critical to have the experience of the recently retired employee in the department on a part-time basis to help us work through the transition. So staff requests that council adopt Resolution 2440 so the division can provide the level of service that our customers deserve. That completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions among the council members? And with that, I'll open it up for public comment. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak?
We received no requests to speak on this item.
Thank you. Close the public comment, bring it back to council. If there are no other questions or comments, I'll accept a motion to approve this item.
Early moves.
I'll second. Mayor Pro Tem Early moved and Councilmember Sopizio Hall seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sulpicio Hull.
Aye.
Councilmember Alcala.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Early.
Aye.
Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. This item is approved. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next is item 12 under the city manager's office is consideration of a workshop regarding a potential new local general transaction and use tax and first reading of ordinance 24-7. And our city manager, Mr. Aaron Laurel, and government affairs manager is up on deck here. Mr. Doug Drost will present on these items.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm using the podium tonight for the presentation portion. I'll go return to my seat and have Doug do about the latter half of the presentation, and we'll both be available for Q&A. So I want to just sort of give some background context here, just remind the Council that this item, while it's before you tonight as part of your current strategic plan priorities, the origin of it really dates much farther back than that. For several years, this council and previous councils have been sort of struggling with the challenge of keeping the general fund sustainable, addressing operations gaps, and we've done a lot of work in that space, but the theme of this item tonight is really making a big leap in addressing both those gaps and really setting the future of the city on a trajectory where we can effectively manage growth, but also still address other priorities. So we have a PowerPoint that may look familiar to some of the information that was presented at your strategic plan retreat. So I apologize if it looks a little redundant, but for tonight, it's also for the public. We want to hopefully do a good job of explaining to the public why the council is interested in pursuing this item. So as I said, I'll provide some background. Doug will go into some details on what a transactions and use tax is and what the procedures are, and we'll cover the schedule for it as well. So first, this is all reiterated in the staff report as well, just setting some context for the history of the city. West Sacramento, we are still a fairly new city, but we are an older place. That matters both in terms of the growth that the city has had a challenge to manage, over 10,000 new residents every decade since the corporation. Also huge growth in the business sector that's been mostly for the benefit of the city and its general fund. However, that comes with challenges of additional traffic and other impacts that we've had to manage. So as that growth has happened since '87, it's just a fact. It's been a challenge for city operations to keep pace and keep up with standards, even the standards we have today, let alone trying to improve standards in some of the operations functions. So when we talk about why the council has prioritized this item and why a transaction use tax may be a needed option, I really want to emphasize why it's not before we talk about why it is needed. The city is not on a fiscal cliff by any means. There are several cities in California that are in more dire straits when it comes to their budgets. We are not one of those cities, and I think I want to start there. That is important. However, we do have serious gaps when it comes to things like maintaining compensation levels, maintaining the types of standards we like to see when it comes to road maintenance, public safety, and we still have a lot of growth. And to top that off, the city is still building. We are building out our infrastructure to support the ultimate potential that we all know that West Sacramento can achieve, not just when it comes to things like economic development, but also a lot of the amenities that our residents have grown to expect and look forward to seeing as the city further develops. And really, the staff report, we posed this question and answered it in a couple ways. Really, I think the council has sort of put themselves in this place in terms of the discussions over the last few years. Looking ahead, what kind of city do we really want to be? Do we want to struggle with status quo, just trying to maintain our current standards as we grow and consistently having to make tough choices around some of the topics I talked about earlier and having them compete with each other constantly? Or do we want to be able to have more resources to really raise standards, to have higher expectations when it comes to things like road maintenance and response times for public safety, how parks are maintained? The second part of it is, like I said earlier, the city has a lot of growth to still manage, and it's positive growth in terms of economic development and adding amenities that our residents really want to see. However, there comes a point where even the types of uses that are the core services of the city begin to compete with those same goals. In other words, you can't maintain a really aggressive and ambitious capital improvement program while you have challenges in your general fund to keep up with response times on public safety or maintaining existing infrastructure. And I think this council, in the history of West Sacramento, you look at the city's trajectory, we've always tried to do both, because there's an understanding that eventually, as the city builds out, the high value of that development and all the amenities that residents want will sort of become more self-sustaining in terms of the city's budget. But right now, we're faced with this challenge of aging infrastructure, all the other gaps that we'll sort of highlight, and at some point, those things come into conflict. And I think this council has made it clear you don't want to be in that position. Just to put it in numbers perspective, this is our crystal ball for the outlook on the general fund. Don't hold us to this, but what it shows is really not too long in the distant future are we looking at the potential to have a general fund gap. And this is just based on current operations and expectations of revenue levels for the foreseeable future. So when we get about 5 years out, we do project having general fund deficits. They aren't, huge deficits, but nonetheless, it is still a fiscal challenge for the future of the city. These next few slides are just reminders of kind of where the money comes from and how it's used. Just emphasize that about 80% of the city's general fund comes from two sources, property tax and sales tax. And similarly, how it's used, public safety is about 70% of the general fund. The other uses are on here, and you can see it really is the core functions of the city when it comes to public safety, maintenance of infrastructure and parks, and some of the operations that are associated with that. We have a number of sources that often come up is, hey, the city has a lot of other funding. Why can't we, hire more police officers with some of these funding sources? And this is an attempt to show, yes, there are many other sources that the city controls, but each of those sources are unique and they have restrictions on how they can be used, whether it's tax measure funding, some of the funds that our residents pay for utilities, impact fees gets discussed a lot. Those have to be used to mitigate the actual impacts of development. And then we have a couple of other ones that are dedicated to certain purposes like infrastructure development or other things that can't pay for things that maybe the general fund would normally cover. Similarly, we also come across one-time money from time to time where, say, we have a budget surplus that was unexpected in a year, or we have property that we sold or other things that generate one-time revenue. The problem with that, while it's useful to fund, say, infrastructure projects, you can't fund structural costs with it for obvious reasons. The money is only there for a short period of time, and you will immediately be in a deficit using it. The other options really aren't that great. You know, we could, as I said, we could divest in our capital improvements. We could make cuts to other places. We could take our reserve funds that we're trying to maintain healthy balances to protect against recession and reduce those. Most of those would only create one-time money. None of them address structural impacts and gaps that we have in our general fund budget. It's important to note, though, we have done a lot of work, both this council and previous councils. I mainly cite this general fund sustainability strategy that the council adopted in 2021. But even before that, there were efforts made to raise revenues through different means. But in this strategy, the council adopted several initiatives that directly impacted general fund capacity and did a very effective job at it, but it was really to address some of the immediate needs the city had. There's a couple of things we're still working on that you'll be seeing soon, or you have seen already. We're adding retail cannabis. We have electronic billboards coming that'll generate some revenue. We've done a lot of other shifts in terms of allocating expenses to certain other funds that were eligible to cover things that the general fund otherwise would have. The lease on the rec center is a good example. It used to be funded out of the general fund. The council instead allocated that to Measure K, and that freed up some money that could be used for some of the operations gaps. However, none of these things are in isolation or even in combination sufficient to address kind of that long-term issue of being able to maintain or elevate standards for core services that I think this council wants to see. So just kind of details on what some of those gaps are. This is at a high level what we're talking about. We have staffing needs to keep pace with growth. Those staff that we have, we want to attract top-notch people, and we want to keep them, and that goes for all city departments, but especially the ones where we've had the biggest challenges. The one that I think we all think of first is police officers. It's a very competitive environment for that, and that's one area where we really struggled to just keep pace with our current positions, let alone add new patrol resources. Facilities, there was a theme tonight. The council allocated funding for the police department facility, which is an older one. However, we have many other facilities that are in similar need and not enough money to address that. And that directly impacts services, it impacts our ability to attract and retain employees, and lots of other important things. And then the big one that I think you hear probably the most from residents is road maintenance. It's extremely challenging as our infrastructure ages, as we add new road miles, as we have an economy locally that is very dependent on logistics, and we have a lot of trucks that use those roads. It's ever so challenging to maintain the current standards. I think we can all, it goes without saying, we like to elevate those standards around, especially some of the older roads. You think of places like Sacramento Avenue and others where it's really hard to keep up with filling potholes, let alone thinking of how we can create a complete street and address sidewalk gaps and everything else the council wants to do in those areas. So kind of a little bit of detail on each department. We asked all of our operations departments to put together, from their view for the council, what are the areas that we have in current gaps, and then what do we want to look like if we were able to, like I said, raise standards. What would that mean? So in the police department, it's fairly simple. We don't have the ability to fill all the positions that we have allocated, and because of that, it's very difficult to think of a world where we have more patrol resources. However, they are very much needed. Our response times are kind of say it all, but also this chart, which shows the population of the city's growth since 2003, you can see there's been sort of a flat line in terms of the number of police officers we have allocated to the department. I think maybe at one point it wasn't so evident, but I know you hear from residents quite a bit. Property crime and other issues that every city is dealing with in California, many other issues with that as well, are harder to address when you only have so many patrol resources to go around. So that's a glaring area that we really feel like we can be better at in the police department. In the fire department, it's a little bit similar in that we have essentially not the same trajectory of growth in personnel compared to growth in the city. And this chart kind of says it all there. So similarly, since 2003, the city's population has grown significantly. We essentially have about the same number of firefighters authorized. The big one here is Engine 45. It was taken offline during the recession, the Great Recession, back around 2012, I believe. And it was left offline. It still is. However, the city has obviously grown quite a bit there. And we really need to bring back Engine 45 to maintain our current response times. In facilities and fleet, this is kind of the public works operations side of our organization. They're tasked with doing a lot, including road maintenance, but also maintaining our aging facilities. And in addition to that, all the other infrastructure that's covered, say water, sewer, those are covered by enterprise funds, utility rates. But the things like road rehab and facilities are general fund functions, more or less. There's certain road funds we get, but it's not nearly enough to cover what we need to do. So in terms of that, there's an estimated need for, it's a significant number, at least 10 new positions for road maintenance alone, just to keep up with the current need. And we have other indexes we can use in terms of our pavement management index that looks at current road conditions and what it would take to bring those up to current standards. And there are some major gaps there as well. The other one is sort of a really, data forward anecdote here. It's our cases on public stuff. And I don't want you to take too much from this other than I think just looking at it more from the standpoint, if you combine the years 2018, 2019, which were sort of normal years pre-COVID, and look at it compared to today, it's a significant increase in both pothole reports and graffiti reports. And those are two core functions of that department that they simply cannot keep up with current resources. And then in parks, I think this one is probably the most telling in terms of the numbers comparing back then to today. We all know since 2008, the city has added a ton of new parks, 53 acres, in fact. And we've also added public art and other things that we didn't have back then, more trail miles. However, as you see in that number below, our number of maintenance personnel has basically been the same. This shows it a little more precisely in terms of percentages. I'll just show you on the first three numbers on the right-hand column. The change has been in multiple double digits in terms of the new things. However, the number of staffing has only changed by 17% in that department. So in terms of solutions, we are here tonight to recommend and talk about a potential new transactions and use tax. Doug's going to talk about the mechanics of that. But we do want to highlight that's not the end of the story. The city is looking at other options to help address those gaps. We're looking at our entire general fund and looking at are we allocating funding to all the places that we possibly can with the capacity we have. I've directed all of our directors to, as they're looking at budget requests for the general fund anyway, don't bring those requests forward unless it's addressing an operations need. So that's one example of that. We're looking at our utility rates and adjusting those. That will help with some of those enterprise funds and making sure that they're kept up to current levels so that the general fund doesn't then have to subsidize them. And similarly with the book of fees, we're also looking at the ability to raise new revenue from some of our new growth areas in Southport and putting them in a CFD that would fund public safety as a small piece to how we maintain at least fire protection going forward. And then the last piece that Doug's going to cover is transactions and use tax. So I'm going to turn it over to him to go through those slides. And like I said, we'll be available for Q&A after.
Good evening, Council. Doug Droz, Government Affairs Manager. So as Aaron mentioned, I'm going to walk through some of the mechanics of transaction and use tax, as well as staff's proposed language for a potential ballot measure and the process and next steps to get a measure on the ballot if it's Council's consensus to do so this evening. So the transactions and use tax is a sales tax add-on that cities can put before voters to go above the statewide base rate of 7.25%. They're similar to sales and use taxes. However, sales and use taxes are generally staying at the point of the transaction, whereas the transaction use tax follows the merchandise. So in your staff report, a common example is vehicle sales. You go out of town, buy a car, that jurisdiction will get the sales and use tax, but where you come back and register it, that's where the transaction and use tax goes. There's a maximum combined limit of 2% that local jurisdictions can add on to that state base rate, and it has to be done in increments of 0.125%. In this case, we're recommending a general tax, so that's would be approved by a simple majority of voters in the city. And in terms of the ballot question, that would be before voters. It's a 75-word limit, so we'll get to the language later. I can figure out how to work this thing. Yeah, there we go. So Aaron mentioned there's currently 4 quarter-cent sales tax transaction use taxes in the city. 3 of them, K, E, and N, do not have a sunset date. Measure V sunsets in 2033. The main distinction being there, Measure V is set aside for capital projects, specifically the streetcar light rail extension and flood protection. The other 3 are similar to what we're talking about tonight, which is our measures that are funding sort of ongoing structural costs. And all of those quarter-cent taxes raise about $5 million a year. This is just a little context to give you on where the city's transaction and use and sales tax come from. As you can see, we have a much higher proportion compared to other cities in the region and cities throughout the state of our tax base coming from building materials, but as is highlighted here, even more significantly from business-to-business transactions. Almost 20% more than what is typical. And that's just important to note because what that ends up meaning is that our residents are paying, a relatively lower share of the sales tax here than residents of other jurisdictions that are more reliant on things like retail, restaurants, groceries. And that's just thanks to the economic sector that has built up in the business-to-business transactions. And then just a little further context in terms of where we are regionally in terms of our current rate. So we're between the 4 quarter-cent measures, we're a full percent over the 7 1/4 rate. That puts us kind of in the middle of the pack here currently. Obviously, some higher, some lower, but I wanted to provide that information for council and the public as well, just to give a little context. So now just kind of getting to the brass tacks of what we're proposing tonight and what we would ask council to consider in this workshop format is a ballot measure to address the issues that Aaron laid out in his portion of the presentation. Specifically, we're proposing a 1% transaction use tax that would generate $20 million per year initially, roughly estimated. It would be effective until ended by voters. Essentially, that means until an initiative sort of process was undergone to put the question back on the ballot. This measure would stay in effect until and unless something to that effect happened. And really the idea behind this is that it could be used to fill the general fund gaps in our operations and maintenance that Aaron discussed. So this slide shows our suggested ballot language. We're asking council to discuss this tonight. We are making a firm recommendation about this language. We think that it's very strong and fulfills the vision that we've heard from council. But it is important that if you want to proceed with this measure, that there be some consensus around this language tonight so that we can come back on May 15th, as I'll explain later. I'll read it quickly, just for the record, but to rebuild roads and repair potholes, increase police and fire protection, recruit and retain public safety personnel, maintain parks and trails, address homelessness, and keep public spaces safe and clean. Shall the city of West Sacramento measure enacting a 1-cent transactions and use tax, sales tax, providing approximately $20 million annually for general government use until ended by voters, with all funds locally controlled and subject to audits and public spending disclosures be adopted. So a bit of a mouthful, but so this language comes in at 73 words, so it's under the 75-word limit. I will note we did add public in front of spending disclosures, which is not in the staff report, but since we had the extra words and wanted to convey our intent to be very transparent and public about how these dollars are being spent, we thought it was worth adding in there. This language doesn't need to be finalized tonight, but it will need to be final for adoption of a resolution on May 15th if we're going to proceed. So this slide is just some potential uses. These are all items, I think it's safe to say, that have been brought up by one, but oftentimes more than one council members, whether it be during our strategic planning sessions or regular meetings. I want to be very clear that, any use of funds, if this measure were to get on the ballot and pass, would be subject to policy direction and approval from a future council. So these are just sort of an illustrative example of the types of things that council has expressed support for that could be accomplished with this additional funding. I think Aaron really covered most of this, so I won't belabor it, but road repair projects, new road maintenance staff team fully dedicated, Engine 45, and the staff to accommodate that, 20% or greater increase in police patrol shifts, maintenance for parks, trails, and the like. And then one item that was actually on, I think, last year's council strategic plan was the Park Trail Ranger program that could also be a legitimate use of these funds if the measure were to pass. So I have two more slides that are just sort of process-oriented before I close out. The ordinance before you tonight is Ordinance 24-7. It's been reviewed and approved by the Department of Tax and Fee Administration, so we're recommending that you waive first reading and read by title only, Ordinance 24-7. If you do move forward with that first reading, we'll come back on May 15th for second reading and adoption. As it is noted here on the slide, it must be approved by 2/3 of the council, which is in effect 4 members here. And then just a little schedule here. If we were to move forward, we'll return on May 15th for the second reading and adoption of a resolution with the final ballot language that will place the measure on the November 5th ballot. This starts the clock for arguments for and against the measure to be submitted to the county. I'm pretty sure the plan is for the Yolo County Board of Supervisors to meet on July 9th, where they will call the election and consolidate ballot measures across the county. If we were to get to the ballot and be successful on November 5th, then the city would start seeing those revenues in April of 2025. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. We'll bring it back to council for questions. Councilmember Sophia Hall.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned revenue coming in April 2025. Would we be able, if this were to be approved, how quickly could we implement any of these taxes? Would we need to wait until 2025?
No, not necessarily. I would say it would depend on the use of the anticipated use of the program. Obviously, we would know the result when the election is certified. Planning could begin as soon as that happens. I think what I'll say also is a lot of the types of uses that we're talking about here are things that have been long teed up, whether it's bringing back Engine 45 or some of the other programs. So I think it would be fairly quick. And I also want to emphasize that while that list of potential uses was sort of just things that we've heard from the council, by no means is that an exhaustive list. There's the idea would be not to, program all of the funding in year one. Obviously, there would be a significant amount of one-time money available that could go to road projects that are currently in our CIP, for example. But the short answer is no, we wouldn't be waiting until April before the council could program some of the funding.
Just remember a column. Thank you. Just a quick clarification. So that could change the projected items that are on there.
Oh, absolutely. What we tried to do there was just capture what we've heard from the council, both in terms of current strategic plan priorities that match up with the ballot language. But it's ultimately going to be up to the council. And typically what's happened in the past is as we've done these tax measures, they're followed fairly quickly by a budget policy that the council adopts, sometimes with targets on expenditures. And the councils, since the entire city's history, have been very disciplined about staying true to what those targets are and what those uses are. So what we tried to do there is just capture what could be, but it's not at all what the limit of what it could be just on that list.
Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Early.
I just, I want to make sure I'm fully following. So when we're talking about the list, we're not talking about what is detailed in the actual ballot language. We're talking about just the more detailed description of how do you flesh out what is in the measure. And the only reason why I'm saying that is I just think it's important, particularly transparency and public trust, that what you vote on and what you say you're going to use those dollars for, that's what this council will use the dollars for. And so I think that's really important as you're trying, like if someone were to tune in and say, oh, well, things could change on that list. Specificity matters.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when we talk about the list versus the ballot language would essentially act as your advisory language, and this is how West Sacramento has done it in the past. The advisory language is then translated into expenditure targets or a budget policy that the council has followed, and all of that tracks together. What we had on there, I think the slide, maybe Doug, if you want to go back to it, was just a representative list of all these things fall under the ballot language and are also things that we've heard from council that are strategic priorities. So only offering this as an example of the types of things you could do with it.
That's helpful. I think comments, probably less questions, but more commentary. I appreciate the presentation, both from our city manager as well as Doug from you. Things that I will say jumped off the screen for me is our police response time, and I know that this has been a point of stress, both for just our residents, but as well, quite frankly, for our police officers. And no matter what we're doing, I think that the council has said over and over again, and we're resolute in this, is we need more police officers, and we need to be competitive in regards to just our surrounding cities and how we are able to recruit. And this enables us to be able to really begin to staff up the way that we need to. I think as we saw the growth charts for public safety in regards to our fire and Engine 45, I think we also have all said and stressed how important it is that the city has grown. The city has actually grown exponentially, and our public safety has not been able necessarily to keep up with that growth in the same way because of, quite frankly, our budget and budget restrictions. And again, we're a small city, as Councilmember Orozco constantly says, that punches above our weight. And I think that is really important. But we have gotten to a point where we've grown so big that we need to be able to actually keep up with both the maintenance of our roads. We feel it a lot in Southport, as well, again, as our public safety and just response times. And so as I look at this, I have to admit, I don't know what other options we have in looking at what 2029 and 2033 gets us in regards to if we want to continue to take care of our residents, of our community members. It feels that something has to give.
Thank you, Mayor Bertumberly. Councilmember Orozco.
Agreed. Just to clarify, the decision that we're making tonight is the first portion of our just essentially putting this before voters so they can make the decision. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so we're not making a decision tonight to approve any tax measure, just for the audience out there that's following.
No, it would
Okay.
be subject to voter approval.
Okay, so giving our residents the freedom to make that decision on behalf of their own city. Now, I've been on this council long enough to see us pass two measures, Measure E and Measure N, and the staff report outlines the purposes for each of them. Measure N most recently having to do with inclusive economic development, public safety, and other community improvements. I've seen actually those monies from E and N be specifically earmarked for those particular purposes. And so I feel confident that this council and the council thereafter would follow that directive. I will say that I'm sure I can speak for many of the 55,000 residents and the households in West Sacramento when I say that inflation and the cost of living and paying for gas and going to the grocery store is incredible. You know, going and buying flossers or Band-Aids at Walgreens is not what it used to be. And, you know, as someone who just paid out of pocket $3,400 2 days ago for some health care necessities, I'll say that the crunch is real and the impact is, at least in my household, it's real, and I can only imagine what it's like for other households here. With that said, these are pressing problems that we deal with every budget cycle, every time we're doing negotiations for our staff, for our employees, our core services, and that's what we're here for, is to provide core services. And then on top of that, if we have additional resources to provide amenities and to have after-school programs and all the things that would help our residents. And I know that we're growing, and I know that we have needs that are immediate, pressing, and very overdue, that should have been funded 3 years ago, that our police department could use. You know, we're talking about a facelift to minor upgrades to the police department when we should have a facility that represents how we truly feel about our law enforcement officers and how they should be working. And that includes fire as well, but also the dream of having these parks that we could be proud of so that our children could enjoy recreational activities, and we could have the upgrade to Bright Park that we talk about, you know, being so important to our lights working in City Hall tonight. Okay, fair enough.
Right there.
But our homeless issue and that's not getting better. I mean, we have done a fantastic job in West Sacramento because we have used our resources right. It isn't what it could be, even though I know to some measures, in some in some minds, it's still terrible. Which, you know, that's definitely arguable. But I think what I've been hearing for now years, and I agree, is that we need to do something about our roads, like now. Like yesterday. And, you know, these large infrastructure needs aren't cheap. I remember sitting through what felt like 3 hours of presentation years ago about our roads and the investment necessary. And with some recent changes to what's going to happen in our city activity-wise, I know that that's going to even be more real to us. So unless we do something, we won't be able to afford any new amenities or programs or raises unless we take care of our basic needs and ask our community to step forward. But let me just also comment on that, because I feel like I understand this, and I want to just reiterate that the impact on our own residents isn't it fair to say that the majority of the sales tax generated in our city that would be supported in this tax measure is from regional industry segments such as, say, Walmart and IKEA, Shoppers, and Home Depot, Lowe's, and whatnot?
Yeah, so I don't know if our finance director wants to opine a little bit more on that, but it's a little hard to split out things, but yes, we're very confident that a majority of the sales tax is coming from either out-of-town residents or individuals or businesses.
Okay, right. Yeah, business-to-business transaction and whatnot. And so I guess while we would be hypothetically approving that, and this is yet to come, right, when it comes before the voters, if they decide that that's what they want for their city, to recognize that it's the person from Davis who wants to go to IKEA and buy a dresser, and that sales tax revenue would then be realized by our city, even though they go back home to their own rooftop over there and not here. So that is a plus, because we want people, that certainly is a big consideration. With that, I feel the reluctance, but I also recognize the need. And I know that our city council have been very good stewards of the funding that we receive, and we scrutinize our budget to the point where we know that we're not engaging in waste And with that, I am in support of this going before our voters. I did see that in the language, it stated address homelessness, and I know that this has been scrutinized probably several times before it got to this level. I know in the past, it has been maybe reduce the impacts and incidences of homelessness. I don't know if that has any consequence, but ultimately, I'm sure that's what it is meant to address.
Yeah, it's mostly just a economy of words issue at this point. We're running up against it.
That's fair.
You like that?
Actually. Thank you.
Great. So I do have a few questions, some comments. I do think, though, in asking the voters to increase, sales tax, we do have a duty to provide that fiscal transparency and being accountable. And I anticipate that we will be, asked that question by the public. And just wanted to ask the city manager, is there a way for us to educate the public about our expenditures?
Yes, I think what we would recommend doing, rather than rely on, we can always point people to our finance department's budget page, but it checks the box in terms of providing information, but it's not always the most easily digestible format for people to go in and see, okay, where does the money come from? Where does it go? Why does the council think we need this? And perhaps what does the council have in mind for this measure should it pass? So what other cities have done, and we would suggest doing the same thing, is to provide information in a very transparent and, like I said, easy to digest way, like a website. So if the council chooses to move forward with this, we would immediately kind of follow that direction and make that available as soon as possible to provide information that people could be directed to see some of that, to answer some of those questions and learn more about what the council wants to do.
Thank you. Councilmember Orozco referenced that we have been good stewards of our expenses. And can you share, while here for the public, what those are? What are the documents that people can take a look at today, for example?
Sure. So I think when we talk about tax measure funds, especially, one thing that we do annually is an annual tax measure expenditure report. And kind of what I would suggest is that information gets sort of reformatted to something that's more easily accessible to people. It covers a lot of information about all the past tax measures. But I think what you'll find, even within the kind of longer form of that, is the councils have had very good discipline about sticking to the advisory uses in those tax measures. I think the most recent one that was mentioned was Measure N. You can point to several projects that this council and just previous councils have used to advance projects like Memorial Park. That project would not have happened had Measure N not passed when it did. Bright Park is another one that will be likely receiving that. We have a small business program that we're standing up with those funds to address inclusive economic development. And again, budget policies were set by the council following the passage of it, including that at least half of the money would go to public safety. And half of the money has absolutely gone to public safety out of Measure N. So easy for me to say that here, but that's partly what we're talking about doing with a website that would show kind of in real dollars the categories and reflect on what the measures did, just to reinforce that both transparency, but also that the city has a good track record of using the money how the council said we would.
And in Measure N, funding for police officers, because I recall in chatting with the voters about that, there was some skepticism about that actually going to police officers. As I anticipate there'll be some skepticism about this ballot measure. What did it fund, if half of it did go to fund police department, police officers?
It absolutely funds police officers. Police officer salaries are part of their overall budget, comes out of Measure N. But it also funded other things like equipment. And I believe at least a portion of Measure N funds were used to finance some of our newer fire apparatus, so the fire engines some of the other vehicles. I believe also, for example, we paid off some of the facilities costs that we had owed for Station 45 with Measure In. So it has been very much true to its intent that the council set about public safety. And just to really directly address the first part of what you asked, it does go to fund police officer positions.
Okay. In taking a look at making sure that we pay not only our first responders, but our employees, so we can reduce turnover. We're not a training ground. We are, we are well-staffed with trained individuals who are, have institutional knowledge and also connected with our community. What does it take? We have a ballot measure in front of us. We're not quite saying we're doing just that in this ballot measure, but I just want to ask you, what does it take to accomplish that? To have a world-class, city that we are investing in?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'll answer it from the city manager's perspective is, putting together the organization that we want to be exactly that. We want to be the premier place for people to come want to work and stay as well. That's our mantra in the organization, is that we want people to come here for a job and stay and build a career. And I think to achieve that, it depends on, the types of positions that we have and how we're relative to both the quality of work we're offering, but also compensation really matters. When you talk about public safety, especially in policing, it's an ever more challenging time right now to attract people to the profession in the first place. We're constantly competing not just with our regional neighbors, but with other areas, and it's really difficult to stay competitive. So I think this council has made that a priority. There's really recent evidence of that as well. But we know that we're going to have to make major strides to both stay competitive in keeping who we have, but also we want to add patrol resources. The council has been very clear about that. You don't want to just kind of get by with status quo. You'd like to increase patrol and response times. And in order to do that, it's one thing to add the positions, but if your compensation isn't where it needs to be in competitiveness, you're kind of going to be stuck. You're going to have lots of open positions. And I feel like for a while we've been fighting that. We made a lot of headway, but what we're hoping that the council will see with this potential measure is it's an opportunity to really make a big jump forward in terms of our overall standards, not just in policing, but in overall maintenance.
Right. And, recently I attended a ceremony where we awarded firefighters who rescued a man in a home that exploded, pulled him out, resuscitated him, and saw also other events where there are significant car crashes and you have to go in and with your training, go in and rescue people and, save lives. In taking a look at who our firefighters are and what they need to accomplish, both as, managing a fire, a commercial building, or, rescuing somebody from a major car accident. I believe that they cover both areas that, Sacramento, for example, has, paramedic service, and that's, one service, and then the other is the one who covers the fire engine or the truck. But here in West Sacramento, our firefighters are both like EMTs, receive that training, and we look to get, firefighters who have both expertise, because we rely on them, to be responsive immediately. And I don't know if the public's aware of that. Fire chief's here, but I just want to say that is a unique level of expertise that we have among our firefighters. And to be able to pay them and to keep them here, I think for me is really important, because I don't think you realize until you need it that is exactly what we need here in West Sacramento. And I've noticed the significant call volume. I mean, we talk about police and the need for service, just timely service, but the call volume for firefighters have significantly increased. I saw a preview of a report. I don't know if the police chief can come up and share a little bit about some of the call volume and what's going on in the fire department, because you haven't released the report yet. Would you be able to share a little bit about that?
Well, I think there's a slide, maybe we can go back to that slide that shows, I mean, Steve, you can come up too, but it's really evidenced by, I think there's a slide right before that.
Okay, I couldn't see it because we're.
Yeah,
just
so,
the
and
screen's
Steve
not
can
working.
elaborate on this, but the point there that shows since 2012, call volume's been up 45%, and for different reasons, actual fires have been up as well, so.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor, Council.
Hello, Chief.
Yeah, since Engine 45 was shut down in 2012, our fires have gone up 150%, and that includes structure fires, dumpster fires, car fires, vegetation fires, anything that's on fire. And our call volume has gone up 45% during that same time period. And so as the call volume goes up, you know, your response time starts to increase as well. So engines are leaving their district to go to other districts, or you're getting multiple calls at the same time. And so that has happened more and more often.
Mhm. And we have, I think, buildings that are getting higher and higher. And so the demands for different types of service are increasing as well. Do you feel like we have the capacity to deliver that? I know you have no choice, but I think at this time, mutual aid may be the resource that we may rely on to achieve some of those, fire protection services. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I like to start by saying we have a very competent and professional fire department. I'm very fortunate. They're very hardworking. They answer the call. They have a great culture of service before self, and that's something that I inherited. I didn't necessarily create it. But yes, our city continues to build high-density, taller structures. I don't know the exact number, but the amount of 3-story and taller buildings have gone up significantly in the last 15 to 20 years, and I suspect that'll continue. Auto aid has just become part of the fire service. I don't necessarily know that it's not just in the city of West Sacramento, but yes, we rely heavily on our neighbors, and we help our neighbors daily. We go into the city of Sacramento, and the city of Sacramento comes into West Sacramento pretty often.
Well, that's, so, with that, I see a request for a new fire engine, and that's to replace the one from 2012, right? That's taken out of service.
That's correct. Engine 45 currently just has a ladder truck in the station. The fire engine was taken away or blacked out in 2012. And so we would purchase a new fire engine and staff it with 9 firefighters, 3 per shift, which would put that engine back in service.
And so we have one fire engine who's covering all the Bridgeway Lakes area at this time,
Currently, we have 1 pumper in Southport. That is correct, Engine 42.
Engine 42. That's pretty scary. I don't think the community realizes that. I don't think we've been in a position where, a fire, a structure fire was more at risk because that's our current condition. But I've been very supportive of seeing an additional fire engine, and what it takes is to get this measure on the ballot to restore that, then I'm very supportive. And would like to see you as the chief present, to council what you need so that we can, rebuild, some of the things that were, because of a recession or whatever was occurring, to be restored, so that we have a fire department that is well-resourced. I mean, I've heard a lot about what we needed, and I appreciate all the work that I have seen as far as the fire departments getting rehabbed and getting some work done, much long and overdue work done in the fire departments. I do have one question about the 12 firefighters for the new engine. Is there a need for exactly 12, though? Or can we lower that number a little bit to maybe spread it out a little bit?
Yes, the need is 9.
9? Okay.
That's 3 per shift. Those firefighters get vacation, holiday, FMLA, sick self. And so the backfill is whatever you don't hire in people would be overtime. So the cost is relatively the same.
Okay.
Whether you have 9 or 11, the cost doesn't change a lot, but yes, that's flexible.
Okay. So yes, I think, hearing from you on what it is we need is very important for me. And and I believe my colleagues as well. So just encourage you to share as we, because you educating us helps us to educate the public. Without your, because I had great conversations. You have all the numbers in your head. So,
Getting old, I'm forgetting them at times.
no, that's very important. And also from our police chief. And I'm just, you did a ride along. I have to do another ride along with the fire department once again, my annual one, to catch up on what the latest is going on in our fire department. But I have seen, just like one experience, for example, there is an older part of the community that doesn't have fire hydrants. And it took several trucks to, a home during the holidays burnt down. But it took several trucks to bring all of their hoses to get it all the way out to Jefferson so that the home can have water and prevent other homes from burning down. I just see that these are older homes that are so vulnerable to, I think what I recall, it was just a log that rolled out of the fireplace and went on the Christmas tree, and that home went down so fast. Fortunately, the neighbor, felt that resident felt the neighbors would be supportive. But realizing that that's an area that I think other homes could have gone down just as quickly. If it hadn't been for the quick work of our firefighters going in there to prevent that fire from spreading, because if that happened, it would be disastrous for our community. And just that one home alone was horrible, but just seeing that we have to move and roll in quickly to prevent a fire from spreading. And today, as we see, climate change and the impact that it's having in our surrounding community, it's, just, devastating to see that we may possibly be in that circumstance and doing everything we can to manage it. Because we get the complaints all the time, not only from the roads, because that's as a result of climate change, all the rain that we're getting, especially during the springtime. We fix the roads up and there's that pothole resurfaces one more time, after that time we fix it. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you and appreciate you coming up here and helping me understand a little more, and look forward to spending more time as we move forward, with putting this on the ballot, to learning more from you so that we can put that on the website on what it is we need, the accurate information, and any additional ideas you may have to continue to build a more robust and, fire department so that our community can be safer. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the support.
And looking at the ballot language and wanting to make sure that we have, I appreciate you adding public spending disclosures, because I think that's incredibly important to be able to include the public in some way in understanding the expenditure. Do you have any suggestions? Because I don't think we need to finalize the language today, but do you have any suggestions on that?
In terms of what that would look like in practice, or in terms of the language? Well, as Aaron mentioned, there is an annual report to the council that summarizes it doesn't just summarize, it discloses all of our tax measure spending for each of the discrete tax measures. I think Aaron also alluded to the fact that we're looking to sort of update that, make it a little more friendly to the layperson's ability to comprehend and understand that. But I think that would be part of the plan to continue having that annual disclosure of how those funds are being spent, just maybe in a reformatted way. And I think also important in the discussion of transparency is, subject to audits, right? All of our tax measures are currently subject to that. We just wanted to make it clear that that we would continue to do that with this one. So I think those are some key messages that residents appreciate, and just are there things that we're already doing? We can always do better, and I think we have some plans to do so. But yeah.
Yeah, I would just say I think we've really upped the game in the last year or so around public outreach when it comes to things like our CIP program. We do a lot more public forward sessions on getting people's input. Part of it is, a council meeting, doing an annual report at a council meeting isn't the best way to get the word out in terms of what you've been doing. So I think with our communication strategy, better website materials, better ways of reaching the public where they are versus trying to get them to come to us. This would be a significant revenue source and significant improvements coming out of it. So I think there would be a lot of opportunity to engage with the public in ways to not just see that the money's being used for where the council said it would go, but also just really showing the impact. I think we kind of got away for a few years around putting up signage where we've spent measure money, for example. I think that's an area we can improve. So there's lots of ideas I know our staff will have about how to engage the public and tell the story better. But that's something that obviously we would only do if council moves forward and it passes. But I think the language that we have here is, like Doug said, emphasizes that there are audits, there are disclosures we are required to do, but we're gonna go ahead and say it here just to ensure, reassure people that it's part of the process.
I hear what you're saying, but I still think that, the community is going to be, I think, a little nervous. Because I visited other cities, and seen like a sign that says your measure X dollars at work here, and then very visible for those that don't have access to the internet. The website, love the idea, except those that could be voting for it in different languages are not going to have access to it. I think those that are most vulnerable, people who will be voting and not realize there is a website. I mean, who's going to explain how are we going to get the word out about the website? So I'm looking for a way for people to know that how we spend their money in a real accessible way. And the only other way is to put on the ballot language independent oversight, so that they feel that, okay, it's right here, because they're going to read this and say that, and say, okay, there's independent oversight, which means somebody else outside from the city is going to take a look at it.
I think that's a point where we'd want to get some council feedback. There's a lot of ways we could word this. I think what we have here is sort of reinforcement of what is already part of our standard process when we have tax measures. Obviously, every fund we have is audited. The public spending disclosure piece is in the form of our annual reports that we bring to council. And I've sort of alluded to, there's a lot of other ways we can accomplish that. When you cross over to something that's a little more affirmative, like independent oversight, that generally suggests that you would have like an oversight committee, and some cities do that, but there can be pitfalls to that, where, for example, if it's a type of thing where it's purely oversight and the ability for a public body to comment to the council, versus having a step in the process where there's a committee that actually approves how to spend money before the council does. Very different options that could be interpreted different ways with that same language. So I think some council discussion around that would be helpful for us.
Are you wanting it now?
It would be helpful only in the sense that this language has to be finalized when we adopt the resolution, which would be the next meeting.
So at least from me, my concern, I have several concerns with just putting that kind of prescriptive language in. I would be concerned of just how that would actually get interpreted in regards to actually implemented later on. I would also be concerned about unnecessary, what I would actually say is government waste in regards to the independent committee, the staffing of it. And to your point, we already go through a separate audit that, again, is very transparent and public. And then I would probably say my only other concern would be, to your point, Aaron, if there is a separate committee or body, whether it is deciding, making recommendations of how and where those dollars are being spent, when, again, I actually feel like that's our job, and that's why we were elected. And so I think that is important. And if for whatever reason we're not doing that job well, we shouldn't be reelected, and the voters will get to speak to that as well. And so I just think that's really important, that when we heard Councilmember Spiegel Hall, from you in regards to your question of, well, how quickly can we spend it? Well, the more blockage and red tape you put in that, the longer it's going to take to get to the needs that we already know and have heard over and over and over again that is needed. And so, again, that would be, those are my 2 cents on that.
I have comments about the measure general.
Go ahead.
So thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, staff, for the thorough presentation and laying out everything in front of us. It really does feel like we're at a fork in the road, and we can continue to the path that we're on and provide our standard services, or we decide we want to step it up and become that premier world-class city that our residents deserve and truly want, a real improved future for West Sacramento. This feels like an essential, I shouldn't say feels, this is an essential services measure. And for us to create the vision of a community we want, this is the path to do that. You know, the community when you ask the question, you know, what kind of city do you want to see? You know, I envision a community that prioritizes safety, not only of our residents, but our first responders, so that we have fully staffed police and fire departments, they have the tools that they need, and that we're paying competitive wages to our employees. A community that our homes are better protected in case of fire, and bringing back Engine 45, we, you know, heard how important that is. A community that stepped up our game with repair and maintenance of our roads. We know that pothole repair is a huge issue, and the negative impact that it's having on folks' daily life and the frustrations, and just looking at the data of statistics of how bad it has become. We need to step up our game and address that. You know, getting families where they need to go safely is something that I'm always talking about, and like prioritizing moving members around the community safely through intersections that are dangerous, and how we get people where they need to go, whether it's on car or bike or foot, safely. So, you know, we're talking bike lanes and striping. You know, we add miles and miles to our trail network, and we're building more parks, but we need to ensure that these parks are maintained and kept safe and clean. And we've led the region in addressing homelessness. It's the #1 concern of our local businesses, and as it was mentioned, it's not getting any better, and we need to ensure we continue to do the best to house the unhoused and mitigate the impacts. That's the future of West Sacramento that I see, and I know many of our residents see that as well. You know, as a council member, this is my first conversation about a sales tax measure, and I want to make it clear that I don't take lightly raising taxes at all, but through this conversation, it's become very clear that the minimal impact that it will have on residents with the incremental amount of it, you know, and then the conversation about accountability and transparency. And I do agree with my colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Early, that it's our responsibility to do what we say we're going to do with the money, and if we don't, we shouldn't be reelected. That is our job. I love the idea of signs where this money is being spent. You know, I get phone calls from moms that, you know, hey, we have new bark at the park. And it might sound simple, but for a family who spends a lot of their time at the park, and when they have more bark at the park and their kids can play in that space safely, letting them know that if the bark at the park is being paid for by this, you know, signage at those spaces. And so I think how we report out and a stronger communication and, you know, visually telling everybody what we're doing with the money is really important to ensure that we continue to build trust with the community and we're doing what we say we're going to do with the money. And with all of that said, you know, it was mentioned that we only need a vote of 4 council members for this to happen, but I truly only believe this happens with unanimous support of everyone up here on the dais, from all our council members, especially our mayor, her leadership leading the charge with all of us standing by her side to share with the community that this is what is right for West Sacramento and this is the time to do it.
Okay, so I think I'm the only one who hasn't said anything. I also support this measure. I realize that, you know, our citizens really do deserve a city that's safe and inviting. I mean, it's the future for our kids, our grandkids, but it doesn't come cheap. And right now, we just can't continue to sustain what we currently have. I don't believe we can with seeing the rising costs of everything. And it's ultimately, Councilmember Roscoe said, it's going to be the people who are going to vote on this. Our job tonight is to try and, get the ball rolling. However, the mayor did make some very important comments about, transparency. I think everyone knows how important that is. And I think that that may be the concern of individuals that have been very vocal about tax measures and increases. So even though we're going to have, you mentioned, the mayor mentioned, and you also mentioned, it's great to see those things out there. It's where our tax dollars are going. And Aaron, you mentioned that there would be things on the website, but there's some folks, a lot of those that are affected, that maybe can't read English or understand it, even in layman's terms. So I think it's really important to get these messages out in some of the more prominent languages that are spoken within West Sacramento also. It's a buy-in for everyone.
Thank you for that comment, and that is something that we can absolutely accomplish through even non-traditional means. We do have the benefit of still doing utility billing, paper billing. That can be done in multi-languages. There's a lot of options out there beyond just a website. I didn't mention social media, and yes, not everyone uses that, but that's another thing that can be done. All of these things can be multilingual. Our website can be translated. We actually have a feature on there. But that's definitely something that if the council chooses to go forward, staff will brainstorm and come up with some ways to get information out in the traditional and non-traditional ways.
So we have over 29,000 voters here in West Sacramento. 29,000 out of our probably 56,000 people that live here. That's the latest from February 2024, Yolo County Elections Office. And multilingual. And when I canvass back and measure in, there were a lot of, again, skepticism about the money. And I think today, people feeling the pinch that, Councilmember Roscoe mentioned on their budget. Part of what we are trying to do is keep housing affordable, making sure that we build as much as we can so that housing is affordable. And trying to bring in more amenities into our city, whichever way possible, and investing in that. Investing in addressing homelessness, to purchase motels so that people can have, transitional housing. And just recently came back from DC and, received the 3-page report, or 4 pages that Doug, you gave me, on all the incredible work we've been doing around homelessness. A lot of it funded through our measures currently, but still finding ourselves, short because we haven't reached, zero. Then, as far as the number of people that are homeless, there's still, people that are struggling out there. And just the potholes that we always hear the complaints about, reading the pavement management report, seeing that back then, when that report was published, it was going to take $60 million to repave, all the roads in the entire city. I think educating the public on the expense of delivering services in addition to where we spent the money is very important. I think the public deserves to know in one way or the other. I don't think a website is sufficient. I think the public deserves to know in more than just the normal channels here. And I don't feel that the ballot measure is strong enough to convince the public, which is, I'm not here to vote for something that just to throw on a piece of paper and put it in front of them to, that they may or may not vote on. I'm here to approve something because we really need the money. And I've heard a lot about, what are the demands for services, read through many reports and the cost for these things. I want the voters to approve this. And in order for that to happen, we have to put a statement that will convince them to vote for it. And just doing business as usual, seeing how close it was in Measure N, I don't think is going to achieve that. But if there's no interest here, you strengthen the language, then it will likely get rejected. And that's my concern. here. So I threw out some language. Didn't hear any alternative language to strengthen it. Been asking for that. And it's unfortunate.
Mayor, let me ask you.
Can we address that, actually? So I hear the comment. We did reach out to our communications consultant with this language in mind and asked for suggestions about what other cities had done. And Doug, do you want to comment on that part?
Yeah, so, in terms of their outreach, the messages around auditing and public spending disclosures resonates the strongest. They did not test here specifically about independent oversight board, commission, committee, however you want to phrase it, but in their experience, those get less traction. I think part of that is attributable to people not necessarily understanding what they mean. If I could, suggest maybe one alternative, might not satisfy what you're trying to get to, Madam Mayor, but the audits are independent. If it's an issue of, wanting to show that it's a third party, it's not the city that's conducting the audits, that we're bringing in outside independent experts. We have some extra word space. We could add independent before audits, but that's just one suggestion from staff, respectfully.
Our audits are already independent, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes,
I think to make it clear, but yeah.
I'm looking to get a ballot measure approved by the voters.
And here's the thing, I guess I'm 2 or 3 years in, so I certainly am not the expert, right? Which is why we paid people really good money to tell us to do this, right? And so I guess that's my thing, right? And it's probably the researcher in me, right? Where it's just like people start to tinker and say like, well, if you change the question like this, like, well, as an expert in this field, the reason why we did it that way is because that's what's going to get you the outcome that you asked us to. And so I appreciate it. I understand what you're saying. I guess I'm just trusting the experts that have worked on this for some time, that we paid good money, that they've put the best language in front of us to get it passed. They did surveys on this, correct?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct.
And I think that suggestion is a good one in terms of hopefully, I'd like to hear from the mayor, of course, but addressing the independent side of it, that it's an outside entity that's looking at this. And obviously, yeah, it's what we do. All of our audits are independent. But in terms of clarifying that, we have the word space for it. The other point I was going to make is there's nothing to preclude this council or a future council, should the decision be made later, to actually establish a committee of some kind. That can be done. So I don't want anyone to take away from this discussion that you're precluded from doing something that's more formal later. I think it's really just about, we have limited word space, and I get the sentiment you're trying to, express with it. So adding independent before audits at least adds a component of that, without sort of locking in for future councils that it will be independent citizen oversight committees or whatever the case may be.
So why couldn't we put it, I'm sorry, Mayor, I should have asked.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so why couldn't we put it in now? See, this is my concern, Aaron, because I've heard from so many individuals, and I've read, because I want this, all of us want this. I guess our concern is you're going to get the Howard Jarvis people who don't want any tax whatsoever. And we want this measure to pass. And there have been concerns out there from some individuals that are very, very vocal, saying that, there won't be this kind of oversight. We've all heard negative comments from people. We want this to pass. So I would have liked to have seen maybe something, as the mayor mentioned, but something, I don't know, maybe a little stronger. And this is not to be disrespectful or anything like that. I'm just saying, in reference to the things that I'm hearing, was there alternate language that we could have reviewed?
No, but I think it's been suggested. So I would just emphasize that talking about something like a formal independent oversight committee really is the council's, it's a policy consideration you all need to weigh, because it puts a layer of, it's two things. One, it can be as rigid as a step in the process, to where in some cities they have a committee that looks at expenditures prior to the council approving them. That's a big change in terms of what how this city has operated with its tax measures in the past. I think Councilmember Spizio-Hole made the point earlier that it also, by just putting in that step, you're less nimble in terms of getting the money out. But that's not, you don't have to do it that way. It could be a type of oversight where it's an annual review by, an independent body that gives comments. So my point is, I hear the sentiment. There's a way to accomplish some of that by emphasizing the word independent. However, to go to the step where you're saying oversight, that implies you will have an oversight committee. Council can always decide that later, but if you put it in the ballot language, you're sort of locking that in going forward, is my take on it.
So, one more question. So let's assume we want to change it. Would you have to wait 4 years?
No.
Is there a term?
No, so my point is, if you decided, say, next year, you know what, we want an oversight committee, you could do that. There's nothing precluding you from doing that with this language. I think the mayor's point, though, is more, it's a choice of whether you say it up front as a way to ensure people that, there will be this independent committee versus leaving that decision to a later time. But you can always make that decision later.
I do like the independent. I mean, I know it's like already done. I get your point.
Well, don't we have 2 more words we can do?
I just think that having the word independent is, it could be impactful. I think that does help.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt.
People don't, I mean, people don't know how these things work, audit, but independent, the word might be. They don't.
Yeah, but it's word crafting, because not everyone's going to, I mean, some people just peruse things, right? They're not going to really examine a document and say, well, this is the way the council works. We want to sell it.
Yeah.
At least I do, because I think it's a good measure.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're going to be,
right.
Yeah.
So,
you have another suggestion?
no, I'm not.
10:35. Big
So
staff's
this- so this is-
recommendation.
so this-
This is a $20 million deal.
It comes back before us May 15th, so just to be fair to you and the rest of us, it is going to come back. So our audits are already independent. If we want to, we have 2 more words. So if we want to just throw in subject to independent audits, would that comfort you? Not
Yes.
you per se, but
Subject, well, for
yes.
me, I feel,
Constituencies that are.
I think that there will be some, well, okay, it's not just the city doing it. It's in there.
Sure, specificity and clarity will help, and it's already independent. So what's another word?
Okay, so what's another word?
Is that fine? Yes?
It's totally fine by the ballot measure, and I did just want to note, when we did survey, it did use the word independent financial audits, so there is some empirical evidence for that.
I love
Given
it.
the discussion, I would recommend
synergy.
adding independent before audits.
Okay, are we, and that gets us unanimous? Is that what we're saying?
Well, yes.
Okay, there we go.
So you have the language.
I think we have, I have the guidance I need to put together the May 15th resolution.
And just a reminder, this is first reading of the ordinance. And just to be clear, the ordinance itself is what we have to send to CDTFA, which is the state, used to be Board of Equalization, stating that this is what the council has elected to do. It's a 1-cent measure, checks all the boxes. We've had them review it. So first reading tonight, so you will need to vote. That comes back for second reading on May 15th, along with a resolution that asks the county to consolidate the election and gives the language to them. And at that point, it's official.
So I have a comment still. I'm done with them
I'm
yet.
here for you. No rush.
What I suggest also, in this process of educating the public about, how we spent our money, because this is a big deal. I would like to hit the road, not me, staff, with budget workshops to educate the public. I think that might be very helpful for the public to be aware, and I don't know how we go about that. But in the process, as part of the process to educate the community, near their neighborhoods, in languages that they can understand, so that so that they know, that this is really important for them and their quality of life. And because that's our goal, is to improve the quality of our community's life. And getting that messaging out is important so that we can help them understand why the city council decided to do this. Is that possible?
I think the way I'll address that is, I think our staff, once we have confirmation that the council has elected to do this, we will get back together with all the feedback that we got tonight and come up with some suggestions on how to best accomplish all the outreach goals that the council has collectively. And that could, I think what you're imagining could certainly be part of it. It's just how do we do that in a way that's objective and meets, the standards of what can and can't be done in the context of a tax measure being out there. We can provide information, but we can't advocate as staff, for example. So,
Right, no stuff.
yeah, so we'll talk amongst our staff and our consultants and come up with some ideas.
All right, sounds good. All right, I'm done. Is everybody else done?
Done.
All right. I guess with the first reading, we'll need a motion to approve this. So, motion.
Early seconds.
Okay. Councilmember Alcala moved and Mayor Pro Tem Early seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sulpicio Hull.
Aye.
Councilmember Acala.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Early.
Aye.
Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. All right, this is unanimously approved.
Amazing.
Oh. Next, we'll go to our General Administration Function Part 2. Do we have reports from our council assignments?
You know what, I would participate in saying, I could give a report about our cap-to-cap
Sure.
visit.
Yeah, it's a great idea. We can all give our reports.
Yeah, a couple of my assignments were unfortunately canceled, so tomorrow I know I'm covering for Councilmember Lopezio Hall at the Executive Commission on Homelessness, but with respect to cap, I participated in the civic amenities workshops. I thought that it was actually very pertinent to a lot of the things that we're doing here in West Sacramento. Specifically, some of the improvements that we are celebrating, such as those that we discussed earlier today. Feels like yesterday, honestly. But the trail improvements and expansions in our network, and then also with the I Street Bridge and what we plan to do with the future of that particular amenity. We took a few trips. Two of them that are the highlights for me are the 11th Street Bridge Park, which reminds me a lot of what could be envisioned for our I Street Bridge. The 11th Street Park was an old bridge that connected DC's Capitol Hill, Navy Yard, and the historic Anacostia Fairlawn neighborhood, and it's been replaced in the DC government and in a couple of organizations with collaboration from business owners and community members and church leaders and residents. I envisioned a park that could span the city's scape and have, places for like outdoor performances, riverfront, environmental education, and places to, teach kids about river systems and art, and just have other recreational opportunities there. And it's awesome to see them do these collaborations for the purposes of a community, and I see us doing that here. It was incredible, wonderful. And just briefly, the one thing that got me even more excited in calling back home, because we did this tour of the RFK Stadium, and it's kind of the equivalent, I would say. I mean, people could fight me on this, but the Arco Arena. Let's just imagine it's now defunct. It's torn down, right, reused, but the parking lot area. You'd see people doing vintage fairs and things like that in that area. Well, in this case, they used the parking lot to create 6 independent soccer fields on track. And the community was coming out when we toured it. And you'd see everyone from adults playing to children and teams, and people could rent out the space for other recreation. Like, it's equivalent to what we would see here at La Five, but outdoors, and run in a partnership. And I have a lot of information about that I could provide to our staff. But this is something that I envision down the road in our city, because we are so sorely in need of soccer fields and baseball fields and other opportunities for our kids and community members to have recreation. And so without saying too much, I know that there have been a lot of talk out there about, reusing certain fields in our community and repurposing them for even better fields, or using, area in the city for indoor or other opportunities in that area. And so I do look forward to sharing that information with staffs. I know Kate's still here in the room, and see how this fits into our larger park master plan and providing more opportunities for local youth and families to enjoy the open.
Who wants to go next?
I'll go
Councilmember
real quick. I
Alcala.
made some very quick notes. So I know that this year the Cap to Cap was, I think they said, the largest class that they've ever had, with over 400 people who attended. So it was great meeting again with Congresswoman Doris Matsui. She's always so available to everyone. She is a fantastic Congresswoman. I also met with Senator Butler's office, and this year I was on the flood team with Mayor Guerrero and Paul. We've been very fortunate to receive all the federal funding, securing our levies. So I also wanted to mention that one of the great things about Cap to Cap is that you get to meet with a lot of other local electeds, and we have a very strong YOLO contingency there. Aside from our fellow city council members, Orozco and Dante Early West, we had Supervisor Mary Sandy, who's my supervisor out in our area. We had Supervisor-elect Sheila Allen, Supervisor Angel Barajas, Woodland Mayor, Jim Provenza was there, thank you, yes. Gretchen Bennett was actually there, and she's the executive director of the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District. Mayor Tanya Garcia of Woodland, and Vicky Fernandez. And I know I'm probably missing a lot of other folks, but it was great seeing them and talking about YOLO, as a whole. So I was going to say another great thing is I've been to Washington 3 times, and I never got to take the walking tour that Tom Stollard always has. I probably couldn't make it. I've heard it's a really long one. So I took a bus with Tanya Garcia, the mayor of Woodland, and it was really great because there were so many things I had no idea in terms of proportion and size and just the historical significance. We had a great bus tour, so it was a very memorable time. And one of the events that I did go to, and I thought it was really exciting, they were saying we didn't see them, but former President Clinton and Hillary Clinton were there, along with, I believe they said it was Jeff Bezos and who else? Yeah, I would have loved to have just gotten a glimpse.
Oh, yeah.
But the security was really high. We saw a lot of the Secret Service men, and I was really surprised. It just tells me how old I'm getting because they were all young and good looking, and I expect to see more guys like Tommy Lee Jones. Not anymore. So that's it.
Thank you. Anybody like to? Go ahead.
So this year, I volunteered to actually lead the community resource team. There are out of all of the teams that go in regards to topic areas, there's actually only, prior to me, one elected who was a team lead. Prior to this, it was Donald Terry, who's a council member in Rancho Cordova. He actually will not be running for re-election. And so I am now the second person that is supporting community resources. And it's because of just the good work I've seen over the past couple of years that we're able to do. And so I was really, really excited to actually be a team lead in helping to coordinate and writing the policy papers that we were going and advocating for on behalf of our region. I was really excited. We got a chance to actually meet with the HUD undersecretary, and so got to talk a lot about our vouchers and our voucher authority here in Yolo County, and also just the budget limitations around our vouchers and affordable housing here in Yolo County, and obviously continuing to advocate for West Sacramento as well. We also talked about financial empowerment as we went, and we advocated to Congressman Matsui and Barra and Thompson and others and how when we talk about inflation, a lot of the things that we talked about here, and we're thinking about not only homelessness, which right is the outcome, but how do you actually prevent homelessness? A lot of that comes from keeping people in their homes and providing them with the flexibility in regards to income and not only just jobs itself and having to work multiple jobs, but just being able to have income like the child income tax credit or guaranteed income. And so we did a lot of that advocacy work and connecting it to our homelessness issue and innovative ways of addressing it. So that is a little bit regarding the policy work that our team did, which was actually very, very large when you talk about just the delegation. I think it's because, again, community resources, I'll continue to make a plug for it, but community resources always, I think, has some of the best meetings in regards to moving the ball for housing in our region.
Thank you, Mayor Murley. And I was able to, attend a couple of different groups, one for transportation and one for flood protection. I had a gap in the morning, and I wanted to fill it up with doing something productive for our city. So I crashed the transportation group's meeting with the Federal Highway Administration. It was to promote our I Street Bridge. We have a grant in the pipeline that we're hoping to get funded so that we can finish the project. There were other requests, the YOLO 80, and trying to get, support for that. And other regional projects that other participants from around the region sat in and presented. I will say that we learned about other grant opportunities and shared that information with Doug, who received the information, and just checking to see how we can follow up and activate more support in the region. That's what I took away, that we need to get more support letters in. Had a discussion with Mayor Steinberg while we were out in DC this weekend about that, so he's on it. And I got to say that levee protection was embraced by the congressional representatives that we met with. We continue to ask for the funding that is in the president's budget, so that just continues to, move forward on the levee repairs that we had planned now for many years. So that's, just good news in that, given that it's in the president's budget and we do have the support to move that forward. No threats there, but we do need the I Street Bridge. And with that, I wanted to see if there are any other updates that my colleagues would like to present.
But I was going to say I'd be remiss just on this. You talked about the transportation and the YOLO 80 project. So in talking about our YOLO contingency, we also had our executive director of YTD was there on.
Yes, she was.
She was, right?
No,
advocating.
she didn't make.
Okay, no, she didn't. This is being recorded, Mayor.
She was late. Could have made it was a locked building.
And then our supervisor, my supervisor, your supervisor as well, Oscar Villegas was also there. So we had a strong YOLO County contingency.
Yes, we did. So, we did have our, Earth Day presentation where a few of us were there, and it was great to be able to work with the Army Corps of Engineer and taking a look at the Southport Levee Trail and all the growth that has happened, and continuing to build just on the beautiful habitat as we build these levees. It just looks amazing to be able to see the progress over the years. So thanks to Greg, Paul, and the team who have worked on that, and those that are on our SAFECA, managing that. Thank you very much. And the next report I would like to present is the U.S. Conference of Mayors I'm a part of the Homelessness Task Force, and we had a meeting in D.C. It was incredible. So Mayor Bass is the chair of the task force, and this is her priority. Focusing on just homelessness alone. You can talk about everything related to homelessness, housing affordability, building, things like that. We did bring up some of those things. But homelessness alone, and meeting with the acting secretary, Adrienne Podman, Secretary Javier Becerra. We also met with the White House officials. I want to share with you my souvenir. Nice. I brought it home. Just I've been to the White House before, but this is the first time I've gotten one of these. It is pretty cool. You know, it wasn't just that. It was the meeting with the White House officials, Tom Perez, Jeff Zients, and Neera Tandon, Secretary Dennis McDonough, and Shalonda Young, who all were very receptive, sharing information about initiatives that are going to be coming out to address homelessness, housing, veteran support, and following up, you know, with, be working with Doug and following up with meetings so that we can learn more about what we need to do to be able to apply for grants and improve our situation here in West Sacramento. So I just want to say that this was a very productive meeting with Mayor Bass and her team, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors team, who, you know, initially asked us, and by the way, let me just pass this around so you can take a look at the information they shared here. They asked for information from us, like our project-based vouchers, our other, programs that we have in participation. And not knowing exactly how this would benefit me, it was incredibly beneficial. I appreciate Doug and the team putting together the fact sheet and the talking points and all the background information, because that helped me to really jump in and relate to the conversation, specifically as it relates to West Sacramento. Some of the projects that we could not build affordable housing construction because we do not have the vouchers, the project-based vouchers, and being able to do some of the things like that. Go ahead.
I will tell you, our last meeting, I just approved 19 more for West Sacramento, just FYI.
That's great to know. That's great to know. So we do have affordable housing developers who do want to do more in the city, and it explained that there's this barrier, and we need, to be able to, make some improvements in this area. So just want to say that I think that they were very receptive, and, they understand. The one thing that they understand is that mayors are on the front lines and council members on the front lines in delivering these services, public safety being an area that a lot of people talked about. If you're not feeling safe in the community, they're not feeling safe in the community, and that's our response, system. So, so I just want to say very productive and a great opportunity for me to express what's going on here in West Sacramento.
Madam Mayor, I'm so sorry.
Do you have a
thank
report?
you. Just one more thing.
Yes.
I did have breakfast with the Small Business Administrator, Isabel Guzman, and talked about our priorities here in West Sacramento. And I had reached out to our city manager to see if there were any specific asks, as she and I go back pretty far. But, lots of opportunities with Small Business Administration. I just thought it was really cool to represent, level. So
That's great.
You've revived my attention to that. I wanted to make sure that that was noted.
And they're having a luncheon. Did you know about that luncheon? They're having a luncheon.
No, I did a private breakfast.
Private,
there,
okay.
but,
So yeah, that's good. Thank you for sharing
yeah.
that. All right. Next is city manager report,
No report, thank you.
city attorney report,
Nothing to report.
staff direction from city council members, none. Future agenda items, none that I could find in the binder. Next, I would like to adjourn in the memory of Delane Easton. I don't know if you all knew her, but I think everybody knew her in one way or another. Passed away in the presence of her loving family on April 20th. It was a very abrupt situation. So I kind of feel caught off guard by this loss, given that she was a mentor. She was somebody who took you under her wing to help you to succeed in life and whatever your personal goals were. With her background as an educator from, California, she was also a professor of, by education. She was the first woman to be elected California State Superintendent of Public Instruction. And she represented parts of Alameda County, Santa Clara County, and the California State Assembly between 1986 and 1994. So she being a mentor and a champion for many great causes and leader in our community. She'll be greatly missed. Gone too soon. I'm just really, really sad for me. So she'll be remembered fondly in our hearts. In her memory. Accept the motion.
So moved.
Early second.
you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Orozco moved, and Mayor Pro Tem Early seconded. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Sulpicio Hull.
Aye.
Councilmember Ocala.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Early.
Aye.
Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. All right, we are now adjourned, everybody. Thank you for hanging in there.